What's up, everybody? Welcome to the MycoGeeky Podcast, the podcast that goes deep so you can level up your at-home mycology game. I am your host, MycoGeeky, and tonight, boy, do I got a show for you guys. This is going to be a good one. So, we have done a lot of cultivation. We have talked to a lot of cultivators. We have learned a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, but we don't do too much talking about. We don't talk about why we're doing this. So, we're going to evolve. We're still always going to be talking about cultivation, don't you worry. But we're going to start talking about some more things. We're going to talk about why we grow. We're going to talk about advocacy for what we believe in. We're going to start talking about a little bit more stuff. So tonight, in that spirit, this will be the first interview that I do, talking to somebody not specifically about growing mushrooms. But we will be talking about how you can use psilocybin to integrate that experience into therapy in a therapeutic setting. Tonight, I will be talking with Carla Aspesberger. She is an integration therapist, specialist, breathwork specialist. She does all sorts of stuff. Meditation, breathwork, contemplations, mindfulness, science, yoga in all forms, including Kundalini. Watch out, it's a doozy. Journaling, unified physics, all sorts of stuff. The whole goal here is to try to integrate and come to terms with who we are, ourselves, and these amazing experiences that we have on psilocybin. So, then we're going to talk to a young grower who got her start during COVID and has never looked back since. She is fascinating. She's special. And then, of course, we got Ed. Can't forget about Ed. He missed last week, a couple weeks ago. He slept in. When we do this, it's late at night. Where it is for him, it's bright and early in the morning, and he was just tired. He's at his 486th cross at this point. So anyway, it's all good. We got Ed back. We're going to talk to him a little bit, and should be a good show. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Carla Aspesberger.
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
We're just hanging out in the basement, growing mushrooms, talking about mushrooms, thinking about mushrooms, experiencing the benefits of mushrooms. That is what I do, besides raise kids, have a job, and a wife, and all that fun stuff. But today, right now, we're going to talk about something that we have not really gotten into too deeply yet in the podcast, but I'm hoping that will change. I'm aggressively trying to broaden the topic, not just from how do we grow mushrooms if we have an interest in experiencing psilocybin and maybe other actives, into so we're growing them, and maybe we've had our first trip, or we're microdosing and things are starting to happen, but that's only one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So I reached out to you and I said, I like your website. I like what you're about. I like your message. Would you like to come on and talk a little about who you are and what you do? And here we are.
Here we are.
So why don't you just start off? Tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be in the career and the modality that you're in now.
Okay. I'm not going to do the long version because that can take some time, but
It's okay.
essentially, life experience literally put me on the path of being extremely curious about finding truths. So it took me through this whirlwind of giving me so much suffering that I had to explore it to the deepest end. And when I ended up exploring it to the place where I was completely exhausted, then there was something that showed me a little room, and it was called a mushroom. So from there, my experiences on psychedelics was truly in a place of where can I help myself? How can these things open up doorways within my mind for me to help myself? And in that, I started recognizing, like, holy moly, but other people also need this. So my background is I studied psychology, worked as a medical representative, and I did that for 5 years with the true intention of helping people. And then I started recognizing and feeling like a complete hypocrite, like, wow, I'm creating customers. I'm not really creating empowerment for people to just listening to what their body is providing. They're literally hiding and starting to believe in God as a little pill or a man with a white coat. So in that, I went completely the opposite way. Literally, like, left my job, left my household, quit a relationship, quit literally everything that I could, and I packed my bags and I went to India and I went to study yoga, philosophy, non-duality, stoicism, Reiki, like just the whole Western influence on my
Yeah, you
personality.
ticked all those boxes. Those are all the boxes, I think about doing sometimes, and you went and did it.
Yeah, it was scary, but super enlightening. And from there, there was these, I want to say, it dawned upon me that there are these enormous dogmas like connected to all of these things. Like philosophy has this dogma, and physics has this dogma, and psychology has this dogma, like all of these things. I'm like, how can we just introduce people to the direct information and knowledge of that without
Right,
all the BS connected to that?
right.
And I feel that I found my way in helping people to integrate, like integrate altered states of consciousness. Now that was my primary purpose, and I started doing that by teaching yoga and meditation and breath work, which I absolutely love. And throughout that journey, I started getting these invitations of going to a mushroom ceremony and sitting in and sending Reiki to people, or being a co-facilitator, or doing a breathwork session. And from there, the invitation just grew stronger and stronger. That people are in need to know what is the 95% of work that we do when we're taking psychedelics, because the doors are open, but you still have to go in and do the journey, like literally integrate that journey into your body. So that's what I'm all about, is offering just a safe space for you to completely and fully accept, like, I don't feel there is anything we have to change about ourselves apart from the parts we're not accepting about this moment. So integration work is extremely important, and I feel it's time that we take the responsibility for that, our ability to respond to these beautiful, helpful medicines that we have to our access, but using them appropriately, the right setting, intention, matrix, and also how are we allowing that for our perception to be influenced differently in our day-to-day lives, because perception's all it's at. Like, if you ask me from a psychological perspective, like, why do we have a mind? um I'd like to think that our mind is there to create coherence. Like, it's going to try to create coherence between what you believe and this is the situation. So whatever you believe, it's going to try to create coherence by projecting a perception onto the situation. So it doesn't matter what the situation is actually about. It can be a blank screen. Like, you can watch a horror movie or a comedy on the same white screen that's there. So our projected perceptions is what we experience in our lives. And I feel that's what the mind is here. Everything is always leaning in towards complete balance, right? According to quantum physics, like everything is just off of balance, but it's leaning in towards perfect balance. And that's what's making everything spin around its own axis. And yeah, just amazing natural phenomena.
I'm frequently off balance, so I get it. I understand that. I like what you said about um, that the mind or our consciousness is just trying to make sense of everything and reconcile everything. And I think as somebody who had some traumatic childhood events occur, um, and then dealt with the ramifications of that for a long time, not only was I always trying to make sense of that thing that doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
and that's what led me down multiple, kind of similar to you. I just voraciously read everything I could get my hands on, every spiritual text, every religion. I wanted to know about all the religions because in my head, I was like, nothing is reconciling these things that have happened to me, but the answer's got to be out there somewhere. And I think one of the transformative messages that I was getting off of your website and some of your content was that what if there is no answer to be had? What if really, like you were saying, there's so much associated dogma with a lot of these religions and spiritual ideologies that you think you're missing. You always think you're missing something and you're not whole.
Yeah.
So to kind of parlay off of that, you had a post that talked about integration and kind of the root word of integration. And you want to talk a little bit about kind of your thoughts of what that means to you to integrate
Yes,
those
for sure.
experiences.
So, yeah, for sure. And I mean, integration is for me, integration is actually like it's a verb without a noun. And essentially, that's how I perceive consciousness to be too. Like, language is extremely limiting in actually talking about this because language needs the noun and the subject and the object, all of that. But for me, integration is just this ongoing, never stopping, spontaneous, and timeless um, abiding, like this wholeness of presenting itself differently in different moments. But it's like this abiding and this wholeness, like, okay, this wholeness wants to present itself now as a finite human, or this wholeness wants to present itself as a wave of anger, or this wholeness wants to present itself as depression. Something that I've struggled with my almost my entire life, or you know all of this for me is how the integration comes in if you awaken discernment. The moment that you awaken discernment is then you get to know the ocean while honoring the wave of, wow, yes, here is a wave of anger or wave of depression, but I'm the capacity in which it arises. So you don't forget and collapse yourself in and identify only with this strong emotion being felt, but integration for me is remembering you're the capacity instead of just collapsing down into the identification of the wave. And any experience in that way of, this is now going to influence my perception differently because it's completely going to change my experience.
I know about the waves, and yeah, and the undertow, and yeah, it trying to pull you down sometimes. Um, Having a little experience with 12-step programs, I mean, I cannot tell you how many bad spots simply just going, all I got to do, geeky, you just got to get through today.
Yeah.
Just
Just this
one
moment,
day.
like a fraction of a
Yes.
moment.
Yes. You just have to always just be now, which that whole like living one day at a time, that's really another way of saying just be more present, be in the
Exactly.
moment. Don't be, I feel like, I think human intelligence, it's in so many ways, it is equally a curse and a blessing because we can just spin out on, well, what is going to happen in the future. And then if we're not doing that, we're often going, man, of all these crappy things that happened to me in the past.
Yeah.
And we want to be everywhere, but just
Up here.
right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that, and there's Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this quite in detail, which I find fascinating, is that's just the mind's way of clinging on to the known.
Oh,
Because
for
you know
sure.
what happened in
Yes.
the past, and any prediction of the future is also the known because your mind came up with it,
Right.
like it
Yeah.
predicted it. But the only place that's unknown is here and now. You don't know how this is going to unfold. You don't know how
Yes.
successful you are in this moment. You don't know how beautiful you are in this moment
Right.
because you're spending so much time so far away from this very moment. And yet, all you want is to be here, to liberate energy, to be completely and fully in this moment.
Yeah. It's I often make the joke about there's no deer roaming around the woods having a midlife crisis.
Oh, yeah.
There's no squirrel in my yard that's insecure about his appearance.
Oh, for sure.
He doesn't go, oh, my tail's too short, or oh, look at that squirrel. Her black coat is so much better looking than mine. There's just that self-awareness that we have can be spiritually a divine, powerful experience if we use it right, but it can also just be this huge curse
Yeah.
that just weighs us down. And I think one of the things I struggle with this, I think because of abuse and trauma I went through as a child, um, because the abuse always happens to your body, right?
Oh,
Like,
yes. Yes.
so
Your issues are
it
in.
happens in your head, but it happens to your body.
Yeah.
So there is this automatic disassociative tendency in people that have been abused, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, even honestly emotional abuse. There's a tendency to want to disconnect from your body because you feel all your feelings in your body, even if you're just being emotionally abused.
Oh, yeah.
And so the breath work that you do, bringing people back into their bodies, it can be that simple. And I think we so often overlook the importance of doing that kind of stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about people that you've really seen struggle with connecting to their breathing, connecting to their bodies, and maybe like some breakthrough moments or just some lessons to be learned from that?
Oh, yes, for sure. So for me, the breath is the center of everything. If there ever is a center, like I understand it's actually in how does infinity have a center, like where it's only your sense of perception. So for me, the breath is the center, like just the glue in the portal. You can go anywhere from there. And it was actually in my own experience. I'll start with that example of traveling to India and struggling with depression and anxiety, because also like my upbringing was this challenging exploration of how deeply can I explore violence and sexual abuse and like a lack of mentality, all of those things. And the breath adapts to that. If you think the breath is the first adaptable thing, if you're in shock, your breath stops, like, and it contracts. Or if you're like experiencing an enormous like sensation of pleasure, it's like your breath shows how you breathe is how you feel. And your pattern of breath and your baseline, I want to say, of breath on a daily basis can correlate directly into what are the basic three emotions that you're feeling daily. Maybe you're aware of it or maybe you're not, but that's directly linked to the breath, the depth of the breath, the quality of the breath. So I went to India, studied whatever I could from the Eastern philosophy there, and then I started traveling the world as a nomad, and had episodes of having literally panic attacks, teaching a yoga class, going home, dealing with my panic attack, off to the next class, like living this extreme dual life, feeling like a hypocrite, like my life's complete mess, and here I am trying to help others because I know how it feels when your life is a mess. And then I got introduced, like, even after, I mean, I did 500 hours of yoga teacher training. And even after that, I was like all in my head, like, yes, do this pose, like you're kind of like, you're doing yoga then with the ego, and doing yoga or whatever you do with the mind, with this analytical sense. And then I got introduced to real, like, deep breath work, not just you're sitting and you're trying to do breath work, because that's also a form of seeking in a sense, but literally just you're dropping everything and you're just here with the breath. Like, and sometimes the breath work has to be so intense that that amplification of the breath has to outweigh any thought pattern, any feeling, anything. So I was finding myself in the session where I'm breathing like this for an hour, like completely hyperventilating my body.
I have done Kundalini Yoga. Is that kind of what you're
Yes.
talking about? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I did that one time. It's
Yeah.
very intense. And
It's
you are
super, super.
absolutely unable to do anything else. Yes.
Yeah.
It
It brings everything, like, you're
it,
here, you're doing
yes,
this, and this
yes,
is taking
yeah,
so much of your attention, you cannot be undivided in this moment.
yeah.
And then there was a breath hold, and in that breath hold, like, you're suspended and the polar opposites melt into each other, and time literally stops because if you think about this, time is actually breath because time is cycles, like the
Mhm.
cycles of the earth turning and the moon turning, and this is going around the sun. It's like it's just the increments of cycles. So the first cycle that ever exists in your knowing of your awareness and your knowing of your existence is your breath.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
that to me was just this literally mind-blowing paradigm shift of the all you need to care about in this life is how you breathe. Literally, like you don't have to give a flying fish about anything else.
But Carla, I have a laundry list of things I have to worry about. I have so many things. But you are right. So I'm gonna kind of parlay that concept into how I work in the emergency room, right? Where sometimes people don't need to be there and they're there for really stupid things and that their primary care physician could totally take care of. And other times they're dead or about to die or in the process of dying. And the in those very serious traumas, the very first thing that I care about is the airway, right? I
Yeah,
care about, is there an obstructed airway? And that goes right back to that. If you cannot breathe, you cannot exist, because the first thing I worry about in a trauma setting is your body perfusing, by breathing. Am I oxygenating blood, and is all that blood then getting to all my tissues? Because if it doesn't, I die.
yeah.
Perfusion is
Or the
everything.
body does. I wouldn't say the
Yes,
conscious.
the body dies.
Uh-huh, for sure.
Absolutely. So it's all about, I mean, even from a medical perspective, breathing is paramount.
Yeah,
Every time I worry about a patient, or I see a patient decline, or I'm about to call a code on a patient, is when the breathing is not adequate.
exactly.
Every time. It can be driven by other factors, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, unless you're going into specifically cardiac arrest, many times it's respirating. It is that breathing process that
Exactly.
is
I mean,
everything.
even this body is such a technical and like this is a technology far beyond our understanding mentally. But what I feel is because the breath is there always, like since the moment you're born, you don't have to think about it. It's something that happens automatically. We take it so much for granted that we have stopped being conscious of the breath. And in that way, you're not utilizing the technology that your breath is. Like your breath is truly a technology. If you want, for example, if you want an increase in like focus, narrow concentration, like take a deep breath in and hold it there and just feel your concentration like zooming in. Or if you want to release something and you've had a tough day, like a sigh
Yeah.
is literally a technology of release. So utilizing the breath in everything that we do and taking that back to whether you're microdosing or macrodosing on these beautiful medicines that's available to us, you can check in if your breath is shallow and low quality. Like, so low quality breath for me is you're breathing shallow, your body is tense, you're not breathing deeply, the quality of your breath is really low and shallow. But
Right.
if you have a high quality breath, it's deep, it's slow, it's rhythmical, and the heart math has also proven scientifically now that if you breathe deep and rhythmical, like your whole body is in coherence. It
Mm.
knows how to do that. You don't have to do that for it, but your biohack for this instrument is through your breath, because everyone always told you like, hey, you cannot do anything about your autonomic nervous system, like that just goes on, and if you have a problem there, well, you can do nothing with it. But your breath is like you're hacking your system in through the breath, and you're going into your system and saying, okay, try to have an elevated heart rate with a slow breath. It's just not possible. Or the vice versa.
Yeah.
You can literally control your heart rate. You can slow down your metabolism. You can do all these things just by infiltrating it with the technology of your breath.
It's true. As the first, somebody comes in thinking they're having a heart attack, they're to us, our first assessment. Of course, we're going to do all the cardiac workup, but we assume that let's say they're having a panic attack. The first thing we do is try to slow down their breathing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes, and it works
Every time. And it's such simple things. So becoming conscious breathers is also, and going back to the technology of the breath, like that literally can create wormholes and portals. Because if time is literally the breath, if you stop and suspend your breath, you're stopping time. Like mentally, you don't understand because the mind exists in time and space, but your awareness and consciousness is beyond that. And you notice this when you're taking psychedelic and, substances that's dissolving the solidity of time and space.
right.
It's to introduce you and open up that door like, hey, you exist beyond time. You exist before time. You exist beyond space and before space. So essentially, space and time exist within us. We don't exist in time and space.
All right, I like it. I like that.
So the
We
breath is just that technology of here, you can realize this without taking anything.
all right. Well, Carla, in I don't know how much you know about the cultivation world, but we love to talk about our techs, right? Bucket tech and this tech and that tech. And I think Carla's got breath tech here.
For sure.
So that's great. I think that's important. And that might be a way for a lot of people in the cultivation community, because I firmly believe that a lot of people are going to seek out this medicine. They are going to want to grow their own medicine because, man, you haven't lived until you've done it.
Yeah.
And then when they have that spiritual, ancient experience of growing this thing you're going to ingest for a specific purpose, and if through that process of learning cultivation, you start using this term techs, like, well, what tech do you use? What tech do you use for grain? What tech do you use for this? I love the idea that we might going forward even start to say, what breath tech do you use? Right?
Exactly.
And start talking about integration therapies in terms of, different modalities of how to approach a thing. So I
Exactly.
think that's super cool. I've
And
never
even
heard anybody say
incorporating that,
tech.
like incorporating that into your grow room. So my partner grows, and we know mycelium um, responds to low frequency vibrations, right?
Okay.
So low frequency vibrations, we have, for example, a didgeridoo, things like that, which we play while these little beauties are growing. But essentially, your breath is creating a frequency that's beyond your hearing.
Right.
And there's a reason, like, and I'm going to take this, I'm just going to do it for the fun of it, but I'm going to take it back to the Bible when, like there was the first breath and then everything else happened.
Right.
Or life was breathed into something.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that it's literal, it's nothing figurative there. So in the grow room too, like if you exhale, you have the potential and the capacity to breathe life into something. So even if it's in the tubs or you're growing in bags, whatever your technique is, but if you're like setting an intention, never ever underestimate, I've noticed this, never underestimate your capacity for intention. Like having an intention and the breath is just like, we call it magic because we don't know what else to call it because the mind cannot understand this. But if you holding an intention, let's say you're growing mushrooms for someone with depression, like this is the first time that I used this technique, was like just looking at this directing your attention awareness towards this, like inhaling and exhaling with this breath, I am breathing life into these mushrooms to be grown for depression, for example, and just concentrating that intention and breath towards that. um it's extremely, extremely powerful, like the way that these mushrooms taste and feel, and just the experience that you have on them is extremely different, which is so beautiful.
I agree. The so I've had quite a few cultivators come on and basically talk about their relationship with their mushrooms. And I've had it go as far as one of my buddies, a good fun guy. I mean, he absolutely believes that if you are not loving and kind to your mushrooms, they are not going to be loving and kind to you. So this concept, even in quote, maybe not incredibly spiritual people who do yoga all day and do breath work and are driven towards a spiritual path, these people do fundamentally, and I also fundamentally believe that it is important your attitude towards what you're growing. If your attitude is these mushrooms in this damn tub, they're my enemy, I keep getting contamination, screw these things, I'm ready to give up.
Yeah. Or
That
I'm
is
just
not
growing it
helping.
to make me money.
That is, yeah, or growing to make me money. Those two intentions are not aligned with the potential of the medicine for
No.
sure. Yeah. And I think that, well, I think, big pharma is not going away, and surely at any point that this becomes legalized, they are absolutely going to be developing products left and right because this compound is so novel. I do, however, think that I don't think Pfizer is ever trying to grow mushrooms. And I think
No,
there is still something special about the mushroom itself.
for sure.
It is I don't know about everybody else, but for me, when I found a mushroom wandering around the woods as a child, I always felt lucky. I felt like, oh, cool, a mushroom. The form in and of itself, it's cool. They're so temporary, you don't know when they're gonna come. There's no regularity to them. They kind of have this like special, mysterious aura about them anyway. And so I think, and man, I can tell you right now, the first time I grew a tub of mushrooms, it was unlike, I have grown plants, numerous plants. I had maybe about a 14-year career as a pretty serious bonsai hobbyist. So I do a lot of ornamental horticulture work, deep relationships with trees I've had for 10 or 20 years. But man, I don't know what it was about seeing a mushroom pop out of some cocoa core it was its own unforgettable experience. It's so rare. It's so cool. So I love that idea. Now, I personally, I don't even care if my love for a tub of mushrooms makes the mushrooms grow better. But more importantly, is the benefit that I get as a human being. And I think this is why so many people say, I came for the medicine and I stayed for the cultivation practice. That practice is also its own therapy. And I think it's because of that relationship that gets formed. It teaches you patience. It does get you to think about life cycles and things like that. Anyway, it's fantastic.
And also, it, like, for me, the most direct experience that it teaches is you're not in control. You can try to control the environment for them, set up and create the best environment for these fruits to come up. But essentially, like, there's no control there, which is a thing for the mind that is also like, oh man, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I put it in the pressure cooker, I did this with it, I inoculated correctly, I washed everything, like I went to shower just before, whatever it is, like you can, and that leads me, like, that leads back to how we treat everyday life too. You can have the ignorance of believing that you're in control, but essentially you're not in control of what happens to you, you're not in control of the situations. But again, leading it back to the breath, but you are in control of how you breathe. You can be aware of how you breathe in that moment. And that's going to linking that to the relationship that you have with your mushrooms, the relationship that you have to absolutely everything. Like that, if it controls the heart rate and it controls like the blood flow then in the body, then it literally on a physiological level controls how you feel. So a short, shallow breath is making you feel anxious and contracted and super rushed the whole time, where a deep breath is opening yourself up to a fluid experience.
I you just saying that made me think of music, and when a transformative moment I had as a musician when I was younger was when somebody equated the tempo of a piece to its breathing, and the specific instance was somebody was talking about funk music, and he was like, so there's a bunch of white guys in the band, and this guy was white too, but he was a little funkier than the rest of us, and he was trying to help us get a little funkier, right?
Yeah.
And so he said, you funk is like it's like a beast. It's like a way it breathes, right? It's like, and he like really gets into it, and he's like, and he plays bass, so he's like, he's like, so he's got all us goofy white dudes like doing all this stuff,
Yeah.
and instantly the music changed. Instantly it got funkier. So whether like you come about that naturally, or you gotta go see Carla to teach you how to breathe, either way, there is definitely something special to be said for that.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And the breath work that I teach is actually with beats, like you breathe in beats. Um, with quantum sound healing attached, like underneath all of that. So yeah, it's literally like you hear a beat and your breath is synchronizing with that. Because that's essentially if you go to a festival, like you feel upbeat because your heart is beating at the same BPM than that music is. Like you synchronized. Everything is meant to fall into coherence.
I like that
So
idea.
yeah, that's quite interesting
I
that
mean,
you said.
things do. I mean, a lot of things in nature do that. They want harmony. I mean, nature in and of itself harmonizes.
For sure.
It finds that harmony. Even when there's a disruptive event, it ultimately finds harmony. Things fall into the cracks the way they're supposed to. The water flows exactly where it's supposed to flow. We don't know where that is, but the water figures it out. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's really cool. So besides breath work, you sort of lightly touched on meditation. I will give you my very brief experience with meditation. I have personally gotten, because of my ADHD,
Mhm.
sitting in a room with a bunch of, this was all in Los Angeles, California, where everybody loves to do yoga and all that kind of stuff. So of course I'm doing the yoga. I'm trying to fit in, and I only had a couple instances where, and it was when I did a 2-hour meditation session. And it
Wow.
was
Okay.
so long
Yeah.
that there was a point where you gave up. Right in the
Yes.
beginning, I'm going to sit here and, oh, look at me. I'm in the right position and I'm doing it. And oh, yeah, Zen, here we come. But like an hour in, then you're like, oh my God, can I do this? I don't know. And then at some point, my head just quit. And I wasn't even thinking about breathing. It was like I fell asleep without falling asleep. And I don't know how long that lasted. My guess is 20 or 30 minutes. But afterwards, I came out and I said, oh my God, I think that's the thing. All these dudes and women who do this and love it, this is probably what they're talking about. Now, of course, did that make me, become a devout meditative human being? It did not, unfortunately, because I was in LA, too much busy stuff going on. But I got a taste of it, and it was definitely, it's just peace, right? The mind is quiet. You're in your body. You're in your body without your thoughts. Got to reduce the cortisol levels. Um,
For
So
sure.
that's sort of my minimal little experience with. I think a lot of people like to say they tried it or they dabbled in it. Very few people like actually have a formal meditative practice that lasts any length of time. Would you mind talking a little bit about people you've worked with who took the meditative aspects of the therapy very seriously, and maybe how they integrated that with also whether it's macro or micro dosing, how the meditation and those two, the modality of macro versus micro dosing sort of work together?
Beautiful. So first, I just want to bring attention towards, I feel a lot of people have a misconcept about what is meditation. Because essentially, yes, if you're going to sit for 2 hours, then you will get these glimpses of the thoughts are so vast and so far away or so distant in between each other that you have these periods where, oh, there's peace, there's nothing, there's just spaciousness here.
Mhm.
But essentially, um, meditation is not just sitting and being quiet. It can be a moving meditation. If you're growing, you're meditating while doing that. So it's like it's mostly to say that meditation is just completely misunderstood. Again, so much dogma, so much expectations, everything is labeled over what truly is meditation and even spirituality, but meditation and these medicines can give you the exact same results. Now, the thing is that with, a, let's say, a 3-gram mushroom dose, you can get that in an instant. Like an hour in, I've had nobody ever come to me saying after eating 3 to 5 grams of mushrooms, I didn't see the point of this. Like this was super insignificant. I've never had this.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's a
there,
little more dependable than say LSD is. Yeah.
yes.
It's more dependable.
Where if you're going to sit in meditation and you have, let's say you have a person that has never sat in meditation, they're always in their human doing instead of their human being, so they're always busy with something, getting distracted here and there, always the next thing to do, which is in itself a form of denial, right? Like you always being busy is denying yourself sitting there. Now for some people it's super difficult because if you're going to sit there, you're going to touch your nothingness, staring back at you from your core. Like you'll get this, and I saw this in so many people sitting, and then they touch that nothingness within, like, no, I'm done, I'm going.
Right.
So how do these two, sorry, getting back to your question, how do these two work together, microdose versus macrodose, and how to take it seriously? I would say find a practice that works for you. That's why I love breath work, because you're not just sitting there and like, oh man, how do I quiet my mind? This doesn't want to stop. This, oh, come on,
Right.
like fighting with your mind is not gonna, you're sending your mind out to do a job. If you stop sending your mind out to do a job, it can dissolve into itself. Now, there are practices called awareness practice or non-doing practice. For some people, they love it because it's literally turning the mind in onto itself, and that makes it dissolve. So it's, for example, questions like, who do you refer to when referring to I? Or it's questions like, where does the world arise from? Asking those questions for you to go look for the mind, and the mind is not nowhere to be found. So then you mentioned it too in your practice, like your mind gave up. It's this surrendering of the mind, and then you can realize you're not the mind, you're the knowing of the mind. So that is really something that you have to surrender and be willing to, where if you're using some like a micro or macro dose of mushrooms, it's, I want to say they're helping that process along. um Macro dose, it's not even helping, it's like kicking you, like you don't have a choice. So if you're resistant to this, instead of resisting the resistance, they help you in saying there's no more resistance. I'm taking hold of your biology and I'm going into your brain and I'm switching the mode networks in your brain, and what like switch off that self
No, it's not up to you
awareness
anymore.
just
Yeah.
for a little bit, quiet it down a little bit. Like that default mode network can rest, your monkey mind can just
Yes.
take a breather, and you can move more into expansion or concentrated spaces. So
Hmm.
there's a few people, one person in particular that I can mention is he has tried absolutely everything. He came to, I met him actually at a facilitation of ayahuasca ceremony because sometimes I help out there too. And he came back 3 times. And I sat down and I spoke to him. I'm like, so do you want to try to do integration work and see if you feel the necessity to come back again?
Hmm.
Because he was like in I think it was in a period of 4 months, he went to 3 ayahuasca ceremonies,
Wow. Okay.
which is, I mean, guts.
Yeah.
I must say, like going into that space and complete, like I'm kicking you on your ass and you're surrendering now.
Right.
So the curiosity and the yearning was there,
Right.
but I'm like, let's see how you go after this ceremony if we integrate this first for a month and then see. I'm with him now for 3 months of integration. He doesn't feel the need to come back. Because through breath work and meditation, he's like, it really gives me like the glimpses that I had on the psychedelic experience. I get that through my breath, and I get that through these genuine inquiry and contemplations with myself.
That's fascinating you just said that because I just had a coworker. Everybody says, wow, you probably never get to talk about mushrooms at work. But ironically enough, it always comes up and we always end up talking about it. And one of my coworkers who, I guess he had an ex-coworker who had his first significant trip on magic mushrooms. Well, he met up with him. He was, of course, saying, this is amazing. You have to do it. It's life-changing, all this stuff. And so he started going down the rabbit hole, which I can't wait for him to get down here and, organically find me, and then we can be bros. But until then, we're just having these more superficial conversations. And one thing he mentioned was this idea that there were people who were meditating, and through a very high level meditative process, they were able to reach similar states. And so I think the using a heroic dose to, like you're saying, overcome the resistance, the same way that they're now using MDMA for couples therapy because, oh my god, relationships are not easy.
Yeah.
Each person has their own set of baggage, their own set of traumas and turmoils and stuff they're afraid of and whatnot. And then you got to somehow be a couple together once all the initial feelings go away 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road. And now they're finding all you got to do, well, MDMA, and now everybody's ready to talk. That resistance, like you said, it's just gone.
Yeah.
And you can get down to business. And that's such a fascinating concept that so much of, whether it's dogma of religion or it's just internal self-preserving, ego-driven resistance to working on something, it's like the cliche of I had a buddy growing up, his dad did like 8 tours in Vietnam, something ridiculous. He had gotten like 100 Purple Hearts, and I mean, it just nothing but trauma, right, from Vietnam. And you couldn't say the word Vietnam around that guy. Couldn't talk about, I mean, just the word Vietnam would trigger this guy. And he'd go downstairs, you wouldn't see him for days. That's, that's what we do to preserve ourselves.
For sure.
When we have no other techniques, no other techs, no other tools. But breath work, meditation, and what we all love to talk about on this channel, the psychedelics, it just is such a paradigm shift.
For sure.
And like Dr. Rick talked about, that just to know that it's literally just telling your default mode network, hey, all these normal automatic thoughts that your lizard brain and this other tract in your brain, are telling you you should be thinking this way because it thinks it's protecting you, that this medicine can shut all that down for a moment and you can just have a completely original thought
Yeah.
or a completely original experience. I mean,
Like
it almost feels,
a
yeah,
primary experience instead of a secondary experience of
yes,
looking through the lenses of your past or your preserved future, or
right.
the future that you want to predict. Yeah, it's so powerful. So the reason why I say that meditation and psychedelics, it's quite a physical, like the anatomy of it. um have you seen Descending the Mountain?
Mm-mm. What's that?
It's such an interesting documentary. One of my friends was involved in it. They took monks that meditate for, I mean, 8 hours per day, if not longer. And they ran a study with them, a placebo group, and also a group that they got a significant amount of mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And they did literally, like, they did brain tests and things like that with these monks, of noticing like how is meditation compared to this. And the results and the feedback of that was quite profound, also saying, like, I had similar experiences in meditation, so this was just easier. So let me also clarify that I feel monks is probably the only ones that have experienced meditation to that degree
Yeah,
than for psychedelics. I feel I've only started experiencing levels like that in my meditation after I've had an experience of psychedelics.
right. Okay.
So, because the two in itself does two profound things. Number one is it releases a surge of energy. Because if you're present, you're liberating a lot of energy, right? So, a lot of energy. And also, number two, it desolidifies everything. That's why, like, the walls seem like they're breathing, and that goes into your personality, the concepts you hold true about yourself, the images that you hold true about yourself. All of those things starts desolidifying.
Yeah.
So with the desolidifization and the energy boost, if I can use a metaphor, like, imagine that you're looking for your true self under mud.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're looking for your true self under the mud, then there has to be some things that's gonna have to happen. Like, you need the energy to move the mud away,
Right. Yeah.
and you need to desolidify that. So the dissolving of the solidity dissolves the ego mind, which means your true self, if you can put it that way, because we just believe without inquiring that we are our ego or our mind. We never inquire further than that. And then that cultivation of energy is like, okay, it's desolidifying everything, it's moving it away, and there you find your true self. Or even like the sun with the clouds, it's desolidifying.
No, mud. I like mud.
Okay. Okay.
I love mud. I love your mud metaphor. I used to be a poet. I'm going to 100% endorse your mud metaphor because we spend so much of our lives thinking we know who we are. And it is so, this is just totally my opinion. But we spend so much of our lives thinking we know who we are. This is what I'm about. This is who I am. This is why people like me. This is why people don't like me. This is what I'm proud of. This is what I'm ashamed of. All that stuff, that's the mud.
Yeah. Yeah.
All that
And
stuff's the mud.
oh, for sure. And do you know the crazy, freaky thing actually? That's just the program that you were given from your parents.
Yes.
Because growing up, we're in a theta state. Like, for the
Mhm.
first 7 years of our lives, you're recording and saving. Your analytical mind is not yet on board. So you cannot analyze like what they are seeing me as. Like, if you think about it, you're so single eyed and open in a delta state the first year of your life. You're sleeping, waking up, eating. That's all you're doing.
Right.
Then from there, like, you're starting to move and but you don't know that you're a baby or a child.
Right.
You don't know your appearance in this world yet, but your parents is pointing to the small little body and calling it a name. Hey, look at Carla. Oh, you're a girl. You're this, you're that. So essentially, what's happening is we have the possibility, and this is such an amazing thing that I love about psychedelics too, that reminds you that your perception is not stuck in this body. Like you have this out of body experience sometimes or whatever, but that's your innate ability anyway. Like as a child, you're you're just this presence experiencing.
Right.
You can be inside or outside this body, but out of conditioning, your parents are always pointing to this body saying, here's Carla, here's Carla, oh, where's Carla, here's Carla, like always going into these. And then there's this conditioning of, oh wait, no, am I that body, like, and then you start connecting the dots, like, and whether they saw you as an annoying child or whether they saw based on their own experience, if they had a traumatizing childhood, you know and they're passing down these feelings onto you because they don't know any better, then that's what you're going to deal with. You're going to have this image about yourself. It's like the game where we have like you get a sticker on your forehead and your name is on your forehead,
Right.
You cannot see it, but you start asking questions, and it's almost like you imagine yourself going into the head of the person that can see you, and you're looking back at yourself, learning about yourself.
Just the thing you said about that original state. I mean, I've sort of thought about this, but honestly, just the simple act of naming a person immediately says, you are this thing we're telling you that you are. I am this thing I'm telling you are, that I am. And it's immediately separating.
Exactly.
That whole naming process. That's a tree. You're not a tree.
No.
Hey, little kid, if you said you're a tree, then, there's something wrong with you. Maybe you're just playing pretend. But once you grow up, then you'll know you're not a tree, right?
Yeah.
Whereas that original state, that just existence state, that's really the state that all, quote, great Buddhas and spiritual guides have sort of figured out and try to tell everybody. It's maybe it's not as glamorous. I think a lot of people want that self-actualization. They want the tip of that Maslow's pyramid.
They think it's glamorous, but it's actually so ordinary.
Right.
It's just
because it's not what you think it was gonna be.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Like, you are not what you think because you can never be a thought.
Yeah, exactly.
And whatever you think about, it can never be that. It's almost like holding up a photo of yourself and saying, this is me. Like, oh wow, you're paper thin. I never knew a human could be that thin,
But we do that all the time.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Because our mind understands in stories and our mind understands in symbols.
Right.
And it's useful for sure, don't get me wrong. But we have to start recognizing that what I am referring myself to be is a symbol or an image.
An image, exactly.
And that's what we hold up. And what else is depression than being so tired of holding up this image about yourself? I have to be a great yoga teacher. I have to be this. Like, that pressure is so much because the reality is extremely, I want to say, like, in Buddhism, I delve quite deeply into that. Like in Buddhism, they talk about the three base foundations of reality is it's impermanent. Number two is dissatisfactory. So nothing that you experience is ever going to satisfy you. Once you make peace with that, your suffering literally disappears. And number three is there's no self. Now this is something that I always giggle about when I see people like become your higher self and all of that. Like, wow, you're just creating more and more identities. Like, even connect to your archangels. Like, wow, that's still an ego identity because there's separation. Yeah. So these three truths of reality, and I mean, if you're not lazy and you're genuinely willing to inquire into these three things, you'll notice everything changes all the time. Nothing stays the same, whether it's a slow period or a long period, but everything changes.
Everything's impermanent.
Yes. And everything that you experience, like nothing that you experience is ever going to satisfy you completely because you're looking for satisfaction in the wrong place. Nothing is meant to satisfy you eternally because it's in an experiential world, and everything in experience, whatever can arise will fall, you know? And then, yeah, there's no self. Like if you genuinely inquire, and this is the way that I love teaching yoga, is you're not teaching yoga to become fit, or I'm not, you're not doing it hopefully. If you do, you'll still get benefit. But move this body for sure. You're the guardian, I feel, of this body. But you're not.
I mean, so the first time I really got into yoga, and I got, maybe I would never say good at it,
Uh-huh,
but it definitely forces you to have a relationship with your body.
for sure.
Even if you, without making it a spiritual thing, which I think it can be for people, if it's nothing else, it's an awareness of ways you can position your body,
Exactly.
and
And
you
how does
come
the
to
body feel?
understand your joints better, and
Exactly.
yeah, all that. And so all those ways of grounding yourself in your body, which for somebody like me, my lizard brain says don't do that. Your body has been a source of pain.
Yes.
Your body attracts the wrong people. Just on and on and on. And so it's very counterintuitive for that primal brain.
For sure.
But yeah, through psychedelic experience, you can kind of have some of those epiphanies. Now, I was talking to somebody else not too long ago, and they kept saying, oh man, if a good trip, and you just dissolve into everything, and he kept saying that, and I said, man, I'm gonna tell you how I now talk about it, because I feel like that's close. But for me, it's what dissolves isn't yourself. What dissolves, so you don't have the psychedelic experience and then merge with everything. We are all currently merged with everything. But
Already.
because we're like this conscious thing, and our consciousness works a certain way when we're sober and under our normal, homeostasis of our biochemistries. It doesn't feel that way, right? Carla doesn't want what I want. Gosh darn it, I wanted to start this podcast at 4 o'clock, and how dare she show up at 4:02,
Yeah.
right? Like automatically, she's somebody else. She's not me. Look at her. She's not from Akron, Ohio. She's not from. She didn't grow up in Michigan. She's a woman. I'm a man. Like, on every level, all our conscious brain is always doing is telling us how we're different from everybody,
Mhm.
except for maybe those moments when we fall in love with somebody.
Yeah.
But then you get that psychedelic experience, and whether you want to or not, many, many times that experience gives you the truth, which is your consciousness is actually subjective. It is actually a lens that the world is experienced through, and when you can alter that through that medicine, there you are. But there you are everywhere. You're just like, oh my God, this leaf.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, there have been times where I'm just like, oh my God, this leaf. I know this leaf.
Yes, I am the sleep
I
one.
am this leaf. I know this.
Yes.
Right. For me, I'm saying I know it. Like,
Uh-huh.
how do I know this leaf? But I know
Yes.
this leaf. And I think people have very watered down versions of that in other ways. Whether it's I love my dog, or I love my children, or boy, I love to watch sunsets. There are ways we do try to connect with our world,
Yeah.
and we have passions and interests. So we have experiences we like to have. Um, for me, I love mountain biking. I love going really, really fast, because when I do, it's like a forced meditation.
Mhm.
I I do not have the luxury of spacing out with my
No,
ADHD and thinking about something else. 1 second of me not paying attention, and I'm flying over my handlebars.
exactly.
So that, for me, I think that's whether I have, which I have not ever formally worked with an integrative therapist, but I've always tried to understand what the experience is telling me or reflect on it or something like that. I was kind of that way. If I make a mistake, I try to figure out what I did wrong. I got lots of problems, but learning from my mistakes in most instances is not one. So that has always helped me out. But some people really need to work with somebody
For sure.
because they're, for whatever reason, they're blocked, or they have
Or
the experience, but then they don't know what it means.
yes, they cannot translate it back into
Right.
something that can add meaningful changes in their lives. Like
Right.
that's the benefit that we get with this, right? Like it's how is it meaningfully going to interrupt your distortions and lead
Yes.
back to a rawness, and because we all have distortions, we all have traumas, we all have, like I relate so much to you with the childhood I have. Like if you have so much trauma carried and stored within your body, you love to live in your mind. You're
Yeah.
an
Right.
overthinker and you love to live in your mind because it's safer there. So
Exactly.
actually going into your body is a scary thing to do because there's so much trauma there.
Right.
But then
Yeah.
noticing like, hey, I am noticing the discomfort. I'm noticing that this body, such a beautiful thing that it held on so that it's not in my conscious mind anymore. Like
Right.
if we use the iceberg definition, like 5% of our conscious mind, like we are in our conscious mind responding and reacting to the present moment and fully being present 5% of the time.
Right.
95% you're on autopilot in those programs that's stored in your tissues, that's stored in your mental capacity, and all of those beliefs that you grew up with of how you are, how the world is, how you view and perceive everything to be. So in this sense, it's also, whether it's the medicine, meditation, or just this instant realization of altered states of consciousness. And I use this word because sometimes people can get thrown. Like I was working with someone that literally they didn't use any substances, they didn't go to meditation, nothing. They literally had an experience where a spontaneous combustion happened in their mind, and they started feeling one with everything, but they didn't know how to translate this into, like,
Right.
and that's an altered state of consciousness. Your bandwidth of conscious responding, like that bandwidth start expanding and expanding. Like if you think about the bandwidth of light that we see, if that's 2% and what we hear is less than 1% of what sounds are available, um we get to experience much more than that in meditation. Like your bandwidth is stretched out, I can say.
Right.
And not a lot of people know how to translate that back into everyday life.
We don't. I
So
don't always. I try. Yeah, but we don't always. All
and
right.
it's just being super practical about that.
Yeah, and doing the work. I mean, this is the same with, my wife and I, it takes work.
For
The
sure.
relationship takes work. You got to actually care and try.
The willingness,
And
I always refer to the willingness has to be there. I don't care if you fail, I don't care, like all of those things, but if you're not willing, then that's an incompatible thing for
it
me.
does.
And that's in
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Are you willing to sit with this discomfort? Are you willing to communicate what you actually need? Like just the willingness has to be there. Otherwise, nothing else is going to come from it.
Man, well, we scheduled a 1 hour podcast segment here. I feel like we could maybe talk for as long as the Tibetan monks sit around and meditate for. Um, but I think we'll probably have to do this again, and maybe we can get even more focused on some of our talks. But I definitely have a better sense of what you do and what your process looks like. I love the breath tech. I'm digging that. We're gonna have to talk about that a little bit more sometime. But anyway, if you guys want to check out Carla, I'm gonna put all her links in the description below. Her website is her name, Carla Aspesberger.com. And she's got lots of information. She does all sorts of you can connect with her in a bunch of different ways. Whether you want to start a microdosing protocol and actually be super intentional and go, I'm going to do this, but I just want to dabble. I'm going to do this for a purpose. She can help establish that whole process for you. She can do a one-time, hey, let's hang out and talk. She runs classes. Any of the big projects she's got coming up, she's got on her website. So be sure to check that out and see what she's all about. I hope that there will be many more Carlas in the future as more and more people are understanding what this medicine does and its power that it can have for people in their healing process. Anyway, thank you so much, Carla, for being on, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, take care.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're banging it out. We're doing it. We're integrating. If you like what you heard from Carla, give her a shout out, connect with her, see what she's all about. I have already begun working with her on some breath work, and it's good stuff, man. If you guys are ready, she can definitely help you get to that next level. Anyway, so now next segment. Here we go. Grower spotlight. Young grower. She's in Portland. She got her start during COVID. When I was reaching out to people trying to figure out who I should have on the female mycology podcast, I won't name names, but a couple people were like, "You got to check this girl out. She's doing something special." So I reached out, and what do you know? We got her on the show. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sarah Gilmore of SoulDive.
Hello.
What's up, Sarah?
Thank you for the introduction. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yay, we're doing it. This is great. I reached out to her a while back, and we've been talking back and forth, and it's always great when we can finally make it all happen. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I love your setup. I love the graphics. This is great.
Oh, great. So I'm going to just let everybody know that I have, you guys might not believe this, I don't know everybody in the myco world. I don't know everybody in the cube world. And I had not spent enough time on Facebook to happen upon Sarah myself, but was talking to a pretty well-known cultivator about how I wanted to bring on more people who were not white dudes. Again, no offense to white dudes. And he said, well, the first person that pops in my head is this woman, Sarah Gilmore. You got to reach out to her. So I did, and the rest is history. So I'm so glad we're here. And for me, selfishly, this is also going to be a little bit of me getting used to and getting to know you. So I'm going to ask all sorts of questions.
Cool. So, I'm here for it. Good.
All right. Okay, so first question, I ask everybody this question. Just kind of tell us your myco origin story. Like, when did the cultivation of or the interest in mushrooms kind of first hit your radar? And just that beginning story. Just kind of walk us through how you got to be a part of this community.
Yeah. Well, it started in 2020. Ironically, it was the same time, everything shut down, but also the same time that Oregon had just passed a measure to legalize psilocybin therapy. And they were talking about all of the benefits of psilocybin and what people could go through and kind of work through. And I was simply curious. I mean, I had heard about mushrooms my whole life. I had never really tried them, and I wasn't particularly trying to work on anything internally. That is until I discovered I needed to work on things, but I wanted to experience what they were talking about, what the studies were talking about. And so, I tried them, and I realized I had so much to work on internally and spiritually, and so many things that I made it a mission to. I rented out a studio in downtown Hillsboro, Oregon, and I learned how to cultivate mushrooms for about a year. I bought all of the equipment. I spent significant time there, and I had a lot of trials, and there's a lot of learning through Facebook groups. That's where I got a lot of my information. People got really active in Facebook groups during the pandemic. And that's also where I met Nikki Myco and Susie Greenberg and all these wonderful people who gave me a lot of great advice. And, you would share pictures and share our grows. So I learned how to cultivate there for a whole year, and had my own personal journey with psychedelics and other psychedelics. And I just became a cultivator. And also at heart, I'm an entrepreneur. So
Mm-hmm.
there was, and I also discovered through this process, I also had ADHD. And the thing with ADHD, you want to find something that you love doing. Otherwise, you're going to get bored of it. So I love mushrooms. I love what it did for me. I love what it did for people. And I grew a very healthy relationship with mushrooms, a spiritual relationship. And so I found ways to help other people with it in an entrepreneurial type of way. And I started several concepts. And so far, this latest one has been my biggest one that I'm really excited and proud of. But this whole process, learning starting in 2020 till now, it's just been like a whole 3 years of just astronomical growth. So yeah, that was kind of like my origin story with that.
Well, as a fellow ADHDer, I can always appreciate hearing the story about somebody who goes all in real fast. It's for me, just if something is interesting and I have that first introduction to it and it just keeps pulling me in, it's like a momentum. I just can't stop it, which I imagine you can relate to.
Yeah,
So
it seems a lot with ADHD that we find something and we stick with it. So that says a lot
sure.
right there.
Yeah. So follow-up question for you talked about your first experience and how that was really kind of paramount for you just going all in. So and also you said that in the beginning you didn't necessarily think you had any work to do, or you kind of, what you weren't trying to have the experience because you thought you needed healing or help or something was broken or not right, but you had the experience and then you kind of had an awareness. Would you mind talking a little bit about that on whatever level you're comfortable?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. With mushrooms, there is a point of awareness that you're seeing and viewing and perceiving the world differently and yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your thoughts. And for me, it was a tool that brought up a lot of things for me, like, hey, you're not perceiving the world the same as neurotypical people, or you are struggling with things because your brain is working differently. Um, and instead of trying to continue to force myself to live or to do things the way everybody else did, I was like, well, why am I doing this differently? Why am I
Mm-hmm.
thinking differently? What is that? And I started to dive into that, and discovering a lot of things about myself in the process. And so that's kind of like that part of awareness and self-reflection and sticking with that. I'm like, well, if I'm aware of this now, what else could I be aware of? What else is going on with me? How
Right.
can I operate the best to my abilities with how I'm built? Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, this is fascinating because I don't, and maybe it's because I was pretty well aware. So I came into the space because I had not diagnosed until an adult as ADHD, but then tried all the medicines and didn't like any of them. They might have solved one problem, but then created a bunch more, and just ultimately always felt kind of like it was, like you just said, it sort of conforms you in a way that might be more neurotypical, but is very much against your spirit and your energy and kind of your soul. And so it never felt right. And so then when I reconnected with psychedelics, specifically mushrooms, I think I had already, I guess, figured some of that out, or just, it wasn't even that I wanted to embrace it. It was just that I knew, well, this is just how it's going to be. So let's just see what these mushrooms do for me. But it's fascinating, the idea that your early experiences was an awakening to that. That is fascinating to me. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that. Um, but the idea that you could become more aware of uh, how you work. through that sort of mystical experience is cool. I think a lot of people might be struggling in their lives, and or might just be cruising along thinking everything's okay, because they're sort of operating, at one level. But there might be some stuff to unearth that might make you feel more whole or more complete, more aware of who you actually are. I dig that. That's very cool. So you learn to grow on Facebook.
Yeah.
I like it. I learned quite a bit there. I also got punished quite a bit there. But ultimately, there are a lot of great people on Facebook. Are you involved with any groups in Facebook, like cultivation groups or things like that? Like, what is how connected do you still remain to the social media?
Yeah, I was in a few groups, and then I was in a lot more because many people have different perspectives and texts to growing, right? And there was a point I was in groups, I was out of groups. There is this thing in some of these groups where people tend to, it's ironic, right? People will shame your grow. They'll shame, your journey or your experience with cultivation, which is quite ironic because what mushrooms can do is something called ego death. I'm sure many
Right.
people are familiar with that. And it's supposed to kill your ego in a sense, or kind of humble yourself, which is ironic because I'm posting in a cultivation group about psilocybin mushrooms, and we're shaming each other about these pictures.
Right.
So it got toxic sometimes, and sometimes I would post something and somebody would say some very nice things or whatever. But so I would get into another group, or I found a group called Blue Thumbs, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
run by a friend of mine, and um, so I felt it wasn't necessarily a minority focus, but one of the admins and creators of that group was a black man. And so I felt a little bit more comfortable sharing in there, and that was cool. Um, but I was in other groups and had to learn how to grow, and I just had to find my tribe in a way.
Right.
So I felt comfortable sharing in there.
So have you now? I mean, of course, I experienced this through the lens of being a white dude. I got plenty of hate.
Yeah.
I thought that was almost above and beyond um, age, race, creed, political orientation. It really seemed to be like vets versus the newbies. And if
Yeah.
you were a newbie, you were just going to get put through the ringer, and God forbid you said something stupid or something that they could tear apart, and holy Lord, they would just go to town. Has
Yeah.
that been your experience, or have you ever felt like, because of your gender or your race, that somebody was kind of targeting you?
I'm not sure, but I'm not opposed to the idea of that happening to me. I would have, like, for example, sometimes I would have men DM me, not sometimes, throughout this process, men would
Mhm.
DM me, and they'd be like, "Hey, let me help you with your grow," or "Hey, don't say that because it might make you look stupid," in my DMs. And I was like, "This is a cultivating group. I mean, like, I'm learning. Of course, I'm
Right,
gonna sound silly or stupid or unknowledgeable because I'm
right,
learning how to grow." And I thought that was such a silly thing for someone to DM me and say, "Don't say that because you might look stupid." And I'm like, I'm here. I know I'm not gonna sound like the smartest because I'm not. I mean, this is
right,
a new thing for me. I'm learning.
right.
And then some people just want to help you grow because they think you're cute, or
That's my problem. That's what people did with me. Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah,
it's so exhausting.
yeah, yeah. We've heard that on a couple of the female podcasts. We've heard similar things of the let me help you grow, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Oh, that's so noble of you.
Yeah. Well, at first I was like, well,
What are you
that's really
gonna do?
nice. Yeah.
I mean,
I
at
really
the end of the
appreciate that.
day, what I forget who I was just talking to about this, but they were like, "Look, is this really so different than the whole world, right? Like in the whole world, you can go to a bar, you can have guys hit on you all night that you're not interested in, you can get scammed, you can get taken advantage of in the greater world. So of course, all that stuff can also happen in the myco world. Um, so, guys."
Yeah.
Pay attention.
For sure. And we talked about this a little bit about how it is a white male dominated
Yeah.
industry as of now. And so it was hard for me to connect with and find people that were like me, especially Black women. And I do admit at some time I was looking for Black women to share cultivation stories with or experiences with. And it's almost non existent. And one thing that I hope to do is to share my experience so much and my positive experience with mushrooms and psychedelics that other people like me will
Yes.
kind of utilize psychedelics as a tool for themselves in their own therapy and, have discussions and talks about this stuff because it's really important and it's life changing and
Right.
it can certainly help. If it helped me like this, I know it can help them.
I mean, all I know is this. I don't believe there's anybody that could have a trip, a macro dose experience, and come out of it and go, nope, that was dumb. Nope, I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense. Overrated. Like, I've never heard that. I just don't know how you would do that. So I agree, and I think it's important. It's really important, probably, that there's not ever the sense of like, oh, this is a white dude drug. Like, oh, white dudes do, oh yeah, white dudes do that drug, right? Um, this is a drug for everybody. This compound is magical. It does really unique things and gives you an amazing a new perception, right? So like everyone should have access to this, regardless of race, age, sex, any of that stuff, what country you live in. Um, so yeah, I like that. That's an agenda that you have. I have a couple Black women I can hook you up with and put you in contact with, but yet I agree. I have been looking, and it is much harder to find for every.
Right. There's stigmas in the Black community about mental health and about doing medicines like this. And
Mm,
so they shy away from it. They don't have enough information on it. Obviously there's a point in time where you would get in serious trouble and you still can for doing these
right.
types of things. So I do see the Black community kind of shying away from it. I just think it's a matter of time. It'll just take time and
Right.
more discussions like this to make people feel comfortable with it.
I hope, because I don't know about you. Maybe you can talk about this, but for me, it's a unifying medicine, right? Like it at every level and in every way. It never makes me go, "Oh, I'm nothing like Sarah. I'm nothing like Nikki. I'm nothing like." It does the complete opposite. It completely connects me with all living things, all of nature. It's an inclusive experience. It blurs all these lines and labels that we create for sure. So I think in that way too, it could be pretty powerful.
That's a good point. An inclusive experience. I like that.
Yes.
And that kind of brings me to something. I don't know if you've done this. I've never had a macro experience with anybody else. Nobody else in the room. It's
Hmm.
always been alone. And so right now I've got some business partners who want to experience that with me. Now, I'm particularly shy about that because I'm sure you've done a macro experience. They're intense. I cry, my nose will run, I'm drooling, I'm all over the place. I'm
Yeah.
just having a whole crazy experience in my head and just outwardly. I guess I'm asking you if have you done this with other people, especially in like a ceremony type of way, and what was that like for you, and did you like it?
I have never in a ceremonious way, like I've never gone on a ayahuasca retreat or anything like that. And I think I'm kind of like you. Um, it is such an overwhelming experience. I'm a little more inclined to be alone and
Same,
also
yeah.
likely outdoors. Now, I have heard stories from other people um, who have. I think that tends to be a better thing to do, maybe not quite at the trip dose level. So maybe like approaching a trip dose, approaching that like completely self-absorbed experience level, like, so not sub-therapeutic, but just below that trip dose. I think that can be nice. But yeah, I have not. I
Yeah,
think you
that's
could,
interesting.
but I think your gut instincts are solid, and maybe we can talk about that would be a great topic for an upcoming podcast, is, alone versus in a group, ritual versus free form, those kind of things, which kind of inform the set and setting that we hear people talk a lot about, but we don't ever actually get into the nitty gritty of, okay, so let's talk about set and setting. That might be nice to do. I
Yeah, there's
think
no
I'm
wrong way to do it.
I think I'm with you though. I think it's pretty overpowering.
Yeah, it's
You know,
personal.
it's not like having a drink at a bar. It's not quite the same. Yeah, I
Right.
think so. Or like, marijuana is very different in that sense. That is one for me personally. I don't think I ever have used marijuana by myself. I'm
Right.
always with people, so it's complete opposite. It just works differently. They're different compounds. They accomplish different things. Yeah, for me, uh, with marijuana, I always want to be with people. Yeah,
Same.
mushrooms,
Yeah.
not so much, I think. But that's interesting. That's a good challenge. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to get an event together, get like 100 people together somewhere, and just trip balls and see what happens and see what we think about it. Maybe something good could come from that. I don't know. Maybe that could just be like a horrendous decision, but who knows? Well, yeah,
Who
well,
knows? Yeah, there's so many people there. Not one person's paying attention to me, so I can just kind of
yeah,
ease into that type of situation.
yeah. Um, okay, so you sent me a nice PDF. I thought this might be
Yeah,
good to go over. This is
sure.
kind of like your growing process and your early experience. So let's pull this up. All
Yeah.
right. Oh, I'm in the
Uh,
wrong. Hold on. Let me get to the beginning. Sorry, production error here. There we go. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So I kind yeah.
Go for it.
So I just put together this light PDF, and it's really my very first grow experience. This is what I've captured, and I'm hoping to possibly inspire someone. Like, hey, her grow looks awful, so how bad can mine be?
Okay.
In a way. But I just want to share. This is my first growing experience, so I don't know. Are you controlling that? There we go. Okay,
Yep.
the
Yep.
beginning, right?
Yep.
So
The beginning.
yeah, so you can see on the far right, that was how my first spore print came to me in the mail. And I had ordered it from somebody on Etsy. I don't know if you're familiar with the platform, but
Mhm.
as soon as you talk about spores or any type of psychedelics, they'll take your store down. So shortly after I bought these spores, the person I bought them from and the store just completely disappeared out of thin air.
Of course.
Um, and I'm here to also raise awareness that that is not how your spore print should ever come in the mail or be ever given to you. So that was a pretty torn up spore print. Shouldn't look like that. Should be nice and neat and pretty.
I agree.
In the yeah, in the middle picture, that was my tiny office in Hillsborough. It was like 100, yeah, like 100 by 100, and that's it. It was a tiny little space.
Mhm.
And that is me with the SAB because a flow hood was just a little bit out of my budget at the time. But I could afford one of these tubs, and to the right of that is a drill with one of those big drill holes. Oh, I forgot what they're called, but I got one of those and I worked with it and I flamed the plastic and drilled
Right.
two neat, perfect, cute little holes. And I use those plastic rings around the holes are those things that people use for wiring. I forgot what they're called, but I just stuck those in there and it was a cute little setup. So that was the beginning of my growth, setting
I'm
myself up.
impressed. I give you a solid A. That's great, and that's great. That's great to show, because a lot of times, I think people are intimidated by the buying all the gear. I know I got the same problem. I'm gearing up to do fungal barcoding, and the most intimidating part was like trying to figure out all the crap that I needed, and then can I do this? And yeah, so I think it's important to keep telling that story, that it can be done. It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, maybe theoretically there is a person who should not touch a drill, but overall, I think anybody with a basic level of aptitude can probably pull it off. So Oh,
Yeah,
that
look at
looks
that.
clean. I mean, you could sell, speaking of Etsy, you could totally sell the SAB on Etsy. That looks great.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that.
And yes, the we can talk a little bit later about this, but um when you're brand new and you start buying the stuff that you need, you didn't necessarily know when you got that spore print, like, this is kind of not how it's supposed to look. You had no idea, right? It
No, it was one of
wasn't.
those things I posted into a group and was like, "Hey, should my sport print look like this?" And you can imagine the thread
Yeah.
that came,
Oh,
the
I
comments
bet.
that came after that.
That's probably why they got the Etsy shut down. They probably, half the people from your post probably went and shut them down. Yes.
I hope so.
Don't you dare sell a print that looks like that.
Yeah, it's a mess. Um, okay, so starting with the right, far right, that's my SAB where I stored all of my. I took the swab. I took a swab and hit up all my plates.
Yep.
And then, the picture in the middle is actually a plate from like 3 or 4 transfers over because
Okay.
you can imagine those spores were not the cleanest. So that was like several transfers over. And then over there, me with the pretty filter on, that was the cleanest little piece that I got from that. From all this, I think I did about 7 or 8 transfers. So it took a while. It took quite
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks. And I finally got to that point. I was, yes, I'm proud of this. This is what I'm going to put on grain.
Nice. So out of the gate, you bought prints, and I think I saw a swab. Was this a swab
Yeah.
to the right here too? Yeah. So out of the gate, you were germinating on plates.
Yeah.
Nice.
I wanted to learn from the very, like, not the most difficult way possible, but the most, like, fulfilling way possible. I wanted to
Sure.
hit every step. So I knew what I was talking about. So I could go to these groups and I could explain my experience and talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
I commend you. Now, did you pour your own plates right away, or did you source plates?
No, I source plates. I source plates first.
Nice. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we get a lot of people. It gets talked about on the socials quite a bit. This sort of idea, and I'm sure you dealt with some of this on Facebook. The It's like shaming people for oh, you bought plates. Oh no, Sarah, you can't buy plates. You must pour plates. Did you ever get any of that in the beginning?
Not quite. I didn't get that. But one way to look at that is I'm supporting somebody in the
Yeah,
community who pours plates. So, that's okay too. That's justifiable.
I agree. All right. So moving on here now from
Yeah.
plate.
Yeah, to grain. I also didn't sterilize my own bags. I was very intimidated by sterilization because you can't see when something is sterile. You just have to,
Sure.
like, hopefully this is sterile.
Yes,
So
that's what we all
yeah.
do. We all hope. Yes.
You can't tell if something's sterile until you do it, until you work with it. So those were my first 2 bags. And I put that little patch that we saw on the last slide into these bags. And this
Mm-hmm.
is what the mycelium does with the grain. It just eats it up. It's very beautiful. And it's very exciting to see this experience. And you can see kind of in the background there that it's turning a little blue. And so, yeah, I was just getting to watch these grow for a few weeks.
So this was your very first 2 bags of grain that you ever knocked up.
Very first. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with the picture on the left because I hope you can tell that this is not the best looking kind of fruiting chamber here. The mycelium is a little bit sick. It's not doing the best, but it's still pinned, and I think that's as
Mm-hmm.
far as this one went. And it just got contaminated somewhere in the process, and you know what? That's a part of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like some of these don't work out perfectly, and that's part of dialing it in and trying and seeing what works. And it got as far as those pins, but that's as far as it went. But if you click on the video on the right,
Oh,
so
I
you
don't.
can
It's a
kind of see.
PDF. I don't think it won't play it
Oh
as a
yeah, I
video.
exported the
I'm sorry.
PDF. Okay, thank you. No, that's my fault. But you can kind of see that I decorated the tubs. I'm a little bit of a creative, so I decorated my tubs on the bottom. That one's pink there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then so I had about 4 tubs, and this is what the tub on the left is one that just didn't work out, but the
Mm-hmm.
4th one fruited so well. But
Nice.
yeah, and I chose
So
Dub Tub Tech because it was so simple. It was a small little tub, and there was this really great video I found on YouTube. This person made it really simple, and I drilled holes into these little tubs, and just cute little tubs you can find at Target. It was easy.
Nice. Now, do I see in the background of that picture on the right, is that a little Bunsen burner?
Yes, because I thought I
Okay.
needed one, but I learned I just used the flame from the torch eventually. I was like, oh, I
Okay.
didn't need this whole burner. It's an extra step. It's cute and it's a fun setup and it reminded me of middle school, but I didn't need
Yeah.
the whole Bunsen burner.
Well, so theoretically, someone was bringing this up the other day. Um, so I took a microbiology class, enjoyed it so much I took a second microbiology class, and we never worked in a hood. We did all sorts of microbiology. It was always just using the theory of convection, where if you work close to that Bunsen burner, you can do, in clamshell technique, you can do agar transfers, you can do all that stuff without a SAB or a flow hood. So, that you might have a tech video waiting to happen back there.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. That's
Oh, yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a theoretically viable option for people with a fairly clean environment. Yeah, I think that's doable. Anyway, so 4 tubs. Out of 4 tubs, 3 fruited, no contamination.
Oh no, this is no,
Uh,
no, no. Like three
oh,
contained.
three
I got
contam. Okay,
three contained. Yeah, yeah, because
okay,
I'm just learning. The fourth one, wow, that one fruited and it kept going and going and
nice,
going. I wasn't expecting all that and it was fun. It was fun to see like, oh, this last one, I got it to this last stage and it's doing well.
nice.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, when you said three out of four, when I thought you said 3 out of 4, I was gonna be like, you know what? For a first go, that would be
No.
considered an absolute slam dunk like success. So, hey, I tell people, if you get even a single sad, lonely fruit out of your first grow, you're doing better than a whole lot of people. Like that, you should consider that a win. So if you had
Absolutely.
one great tub, yeah, that's a win. Because that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that successful tub was all the encouragement that you needed to keep going.
Absolutely. And it wasn't
Yeah,
easy. And it took a lot of failure to get to that one great tub.
yeah. All right, let's see what else we got here. All right, so
Yeah. So
fruiting.
yeah, here's that great tub that worked out. And these were golden teachers. I don't have a picture of it, but one of them and a couple of them ended up being an albino, or I think it was leucistic because it was
Hmm.
in a tub of other ones. Yeah. So I did get an albino one out of that. So that was a good thing.
Nice.
So they grew just like that, and it was just so beautiful. And you can see the veils falling off of the caps, and it was just like, God, that was a picture that I was like, I gotta take a picture of this. And then when it came to drying them, there was a lot of methods. People were getting dehydrated. I read that people were getting dehydrators. To be honest with you, the room was so small, and I had a heater in there, an oil heater. So all I did
Okay.
was crank it up to like 70 or 80, and the mushroom and left them out in the open. The mushroom just dried. It was
Yep.
fine. I didn't need
Nice.
some equipment you don't need. You could just figure it out naturally or just with what you have, and that's kind of what I did with my mushrooms.
Yes, you figure it out. You try stuff.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
100%.
And from there, I captured my first spore print, and I can't believe how easy it was and so rewarding. And I eventually got a flow head through this process. And you can see to the right there, that was one of my first ventures, and the first name of my venture was Urban Psychedelics. I think the website is still up for that.
Hmm.
It's not working. I'm not selling out of there, but I use it and keep it up as a reminder, like this is where you came from. And I got branding and I learned how to put together spore syringes and I got
Nice.
stickers made because that's what this community does. We love stickers.
We
and
do.
we we
Yes.
love stickers. And so I got on top of that game and I nailed it. I had a shop on Etsy for about just for like 3 weeks before they shut it down. And people, I can say that people like spore syringes. People love to cultivate. It was a very
Yeah.
successful store. We just got to find appropriate platforms, and platforms allow us to do what we do on them.
Right.
But yeah, I turned it. I was sharing my work. It was a business, but it was me sharing what I love to do.
and just killing it out of the gate, one up in that first vendor that sent you that crappy spore print, just like clean, nice looking spore prints. That's what I like to see.
Yeah, so there was the urban psychedelics. That was the first venture I had, and then I invested into a mushroom farm. And just I have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I keep wanting to share these mushrooms to where it brought me to this particular endeavor now, which is called SoulDive. And right now, I'm totally into liquid cultures. It does cut out a part of the grow process, but in a good way. It's more likely that you'll have a positive grow, or a grow where you're actually growing things.
Yeah.
And so essentially SoulDive is a team. We're a team that produces competitive grade of gourmet, medicinal, and active mushroom liquid cultures, particularly for licensed research centers and universities. So we're business to business right now. And
Nice.
We're working on a website. And so through all of this growing and networking, assembled a network of people so they can share with each other and kind of spread this love and this love for cultivation.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
So I agree. Liquid culture, you know, it travels well, travels better than plate cultures. You can knock up a big old fat bag of grain, and you can grain to grain it. You have so many options. You can toss it in the fridge. It's a nice way to go. And then most importantly is you're getting a clone of a fruit, so you can show a picture and say, this is what I cloned the mycelial growth inside this liquid culture from. And yeah, it's a very dependable way of sharing genetics for sure. So
Right.
you sort of brought up more than cubensis. So why don't you walk me through your journey from starting with cubes and then kind of moving into other medicinals?
Right. So I had such a positive experience with cubes. Like I said, life changing. Like this really helped me through a lot of self-discovery. And then, cordyceps were talking. People were talking about cordyceps. People were talking about lion's mane. And this is kind of around the time I discovered I had ADHD and what my natural alternatives, just like you, I did not like the medicines that I was given. And so what I did was I started to explore those. There's this really cute herbal shop up the street from me, and I would get powders. So I started with
Okay.
powders of lion's mane or powders of cordyceps, powders of reishi, and I had to discover how to dose. And I discovered, what it could do for me. And some of them take about 30 days to finally feel the benefits. Wow, the clarity continued. And now I use it in a way, instead of ADHD medications like pharmaceuticals, I use these natural supplements. And I can tell you, like, my career growth, my personal growth, my relationships with my family and friends, have all just expanded and have deeper connections. And I continue to grow. Like, if I could just go into like my career alone just blew up in the past 3 years since I started utilizing these medicines for my ADHD and helping to kind of take control of my life. I had no idea how crazy my life was before I realized I had ADHD, and before I committed to staying on a type of medicinal regimen too. It's important that I continue to take these, and these are things I may have to take for the rest of my life. But they help me to thrive. Some people have to take medications and medicines to survive. I only have to take it to thrive. And so that's one way that I look at it to help me stay on this and stay on track.
So you talked about clarity. I've heard other people mention. I had this guy Shay on, a young grower of a lot of gourmets, and he started out with lion's mane, and he said just the mental focus, the almost like he'd souped up his mental horsepower almost. Is that how you would describe it?
Absolutely. I can tell because I take it at the same time every day. And I'm getting to work and I'm starting on my stuff. I feel just the clearness. My mind is not jumping around places. I can stay focused. I still like move around a lot because I am ADHD, but I'm
Sure.
still able to focus on my task and like understand what I'm doing without my mind bouncing around to places. And just the focus alone has been life changing.
Nice. Now, I microdose, and in my experience, it helps me on the days that I dose. I set an intention and say today is going to be a day where I gain back more clarity, more insight, more control over, jumping around on, like, basically trying to hone in and not letting my ADHD get the best of me. And I feel like the way I describe it to people is I am able to say, I'm going to have a good day today. And on my microdose days, I can do that. On the day like right before my microdose day, maybe that's a little bit harder to pull off. But I've not messed with the cordyceps. I have grown lion's mane a few times, and I powdered it up and I tossed it in some microdoses. And I gave those to a family member. So I have not messed with it much, but you got me definitely thinking I'm missing out here, and I'm gonna have to grow me some more lion's mane. So what in your blend, what all are you using besides lion's mane?
Um, so every day I do lion's mane, and I only need a little bit of cordyceps. To me,
Okay.
cordyceps are pretty powerful. Yeah, and they give me a similar effect, but in different ways. I really don't know how to differentiate them. But I can tell when I do cordyceps, okay, I've got a project and I'm gonna nail this project and I'm gonna get through it. So it's really good for that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And I take the stills, I microdose as well Monday through Friday.
Okay.
And then I take a break on weekends. And some people will suggest like, hey, 3 days on, 2 days off, and it's really different for everyone. I'm in this ADHD group on Facebook, and I had talked about that. I was like, it's hard for me to remember 3 days on, 2 days off.
Right.
Because the way I learn things is through habits. The way I stick to things is through habits, and that's kind of like all over the place a little bit. And so someone suggested try it 5 days, Monday through Friday, when you go to
Mhm.
work, and then your 2 days off, and that kind of helps to reset you. And so for a natural supplement to these pharmaceutical medications, I do that. So I also do my lion's mane just every day, and then
Right.
so every few months I'll kind of just reset from that. Same thing with the cordyceps. I'll reset from it, and then I'll take it again, just so I'm not building a tolerance and getting the best of the effects from it.
Nice. Yeah, so I started 1 day on, 2 days off, the every 3 day cycle, and then was missing it. So I would be 2 days on, 1 day off, and then it was like, oh, kind of whenever I feel like it. And um, I personally found that if I did too many days in a row, the more days in a row I did, the less I felt on track. So I just sort of defaulted back to that original protocol. But I do think that you bring up another good point. We got to do a podcast about dosing schedules and different people's experiences, because I think I have probably personally just fallen into the 1 day on, 2 days off just as a default because you hear it talked about so much. But I have not explored other alternatives to that dosing schedule. Now, I did mess around quite a bit with dose per dose, though. I started having a perceptual dose and then slowly cranking it back until I was just subperceptual. But I have not, honestly, formally messed around with the schedule so much. So I think we probably got to do a podcast about that. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
You
because
got me.
it's different for what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah,
I have ADHD, so I'm working with that. Some people just want a mood enhancer.
right.
And everyone's different and their bodies are different. And so I needed to use this for my mental clarity and during particular times. So I made that work for me.
Yes, 100%. That is very good point. I might have to immediately try 5 days on, 2 days off, and just see how that feels. We'll see. Stay tuned. All right, so lion's mane, cordyceps, reishi, reishi.
I have some. I want to learn more about it. I try to learn as much as I can about these things so I know when to dose. What if they're like, don't do reishi
Hmm.
with this? Don't, if you're doing this every day or you're taking this, don't do that. So I need to look into it. But I have some reishi. I have a couple of other things. One of these mushrooms, I can't remember it. You have to like soak it in the way it comes. It doesn't come in a powder. So you've got to do there's special preps for some of these mushrooms
Sure.
before you take them too. And I like to be completely knowledgeable of that, just so I'm not,
Right.
messing up anything else I have going on.
Oh, so that's interesting you bring that up because there is a woman on Facebook who is like an anthropological mycologist.
Okay.
I forget her name, but anyway, one day she had a post that was basically like, y'all just be blending all your mushrooms together. Like, hold up, that might not be a smart move. Like, you can't just, it's like, when you go to a rave or go to Burning Man, you're just like, drugs, 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 drugs. Like, sometimes that's a bad move.
Right.
So it's interesting you automatically said, no, I don't want to mix too much stuff up here without knowing exactly what's going on. I think that is probably in the future of research. I think we have to start looking at how when the blends are synergistic, when they work well together, and when maybe they don't. It does, however, seem like lion's mane is always a good call. I know a lot of people who make microdoses and always put like 10% lion's mane in there. And yeah, the
Can't go
lion's
wrong with
mane.
that.
You can't go
I've
wrong
never
with the
tried
lion's
it.
mane.
I've never tried it as the actual fruit, like as in for cooking. Have you done
Mhm.
that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like
I've heard it's
lobster. I
wonderful.
mean, it's pretty
Did it
tasty.
say?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I haven't done that yet. I've only done it in powdered form, so that's something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, fresh. Don't get me started. I love walk around the woods, getting me some chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, chanterelles, morels, all the L's. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and just grill them up with a little butter and garlic, and yep, just as is. I have not. So I have somebody coming on here. Uh, I don't know exactly what date she's scheduled, but we're going to talk a little bit more about cooking with wild found mushrooms. So that'll be a good podcast as well.
Yes, I can't wait to catch that one. I am a baby when it comes to foraging. I'm never sure. I'm never sure. Even though I can clearly tell something is a chanterelle, I'm pretty sure I can figure out what a chanterelle is. I'm
Hmm.
just such a baby about it just because of all the warning signs. But I'll have to go with somebody who's really experienced, like you, or
Yeah,
somebody maybe with
go.
Nikki, and like make
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
I
you
know
can
what this
find people to
is.
go with. Yeah, if you're out in Oregon, there's lots of dudes walking around the woods. Trust me, you can find the right people. Here
Yeah.
in Northeast Ohio, there's a guy Don King who leads these forays on the weekends, and yeah, you do a couple of those with him, and you'll be pretty. There are the majority of edible, easy to find mushrooms are pretty easy to identify. There's a few like that maybe you need to be real careful about, but some of the slam dunks, they're easy. Shants are easy to
Yeah, yeah,
identify.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the whole process of washing off the bugs too. That's a thing I'm kind of a baby about too. But
Yeah, so
it's a part of it though.
it's a part of it, and the main trick is figuring out finding a spot to go hunt and then finding your honey pots and then coming back next year when the weather's right. So the guys that really know what they're doing, they know their little spots, right? So if some oysters pop up on a dead tree one year, they know, okay, they log when that was, and they try to get there at the perfect time the following year so that they can harvest them fresh. Yeah, we're spoiled, right? At home cultivators, right?
Yeah.
We're totally spoiled. We're not dependent on anything. We set the ball in motion and just keep our eye on them, wait to harvest them. Yeah, we got it really easy. It's a whole nother ball of wax when you're out in the woods for sure.
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
But fun, another fun thing. It gets you out in the woods and yeah, good times. All right, so we talked about the medicinals. We talked about your early business, where you are right now. What are your thoughts about the influx? Have you noticed over the last 3 years? Do you feel like there's more people interested? The same way that 3 years ago you got, your curiosity piqued. Are you noticing more and more people coming into the space? Have you noticed the space change? Kind of what's your perception of all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was anticipating an influx, and honestly, I thought there'd be even more people interested. And I think people are
Mhm.
still slowly coming onto it as studies come out and as
Yeah,
legalization continues to happen. Even Denver has already adopted basically the same program that Oregon did.
right.
I am on the Oregon Health Authority's equity board to making sure
Yes.
that the program that they had just rolled out was equitable. I feel like we could have done a better job, but
Of course.
there's already other states adopting like a very similar, if not the same program. There will be more and more people just experiencing this and trying to get into this. And it's kind of funny. I don't know if you've noticed, there's not as many people coming into the space in a business perspective as there was with cannabis. There was so many people. There was a flood. It was saturated. The people that were buying licenses to operate a cannabis business.
Yeah.
In terms of having a psilocybin therapy center, I don't know if people. I don't know what's going on, but people are being. I don't know if they're being reluctant or they just want to see what happens first before they try it. It is such a
Right.
brand new program. Um, and people are just slowly getting into it. They're taking their time with it. So that's what I'm noticing with this space.
So when I first came in, I noticed it, especially like I'd say the first 6 months, first 7 months, it seemed like if you were into cultivating, it was not just for yourself. You were trying to sell genetics, you were trying to pour plates, you had a side hustle of some sorts.
Yeah.
I'm noticing lately more people that are just coming in because they keep hearing the good news. They are like, okay, this man, how many, the studies just keep coming out. I watched a Netflix special,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera. And so what I'm noticing is more people that are just here for the healing or the spiritual awakening or the attitude adjustment or whatever you want, they want to quit smoking, whatever it is. Um, and I like that. I that is ultimately where I think that's what's magical about this stuff. Like you said, changed your life, changed my life, changed lots of people's lives, and I love seeing the influx of people coming here for that reason, rather than, well, I'm gonna get rich doing this.
No,
Yeah,
no, I don't see that at
I
all.
agree.
And it's
I
kind of
agree.
like not what the culture is about. And
Yeah,
I've seen people in the culture kind of shut that down. Like we're
yeah,
not here for that. I
yeah.
see that you're trying to make money off of this and we're not here for that.
Right.
Here for the medicine first, for what, helping not just yourself, but here to help others. That's kind of what the
Yeah,
culture is about. That's why you get all those freebies when you get an order. When you make an order, you
yeah,
get all these stickers and because
yeah.
we're about sharing first.
Yes. Yeah.
Not so much about the money.
The last podcast I did, Willie Myco had mentioned something about he had to leave, Facebook and Reddit and all the, and I'm sorry, he not those. I think he was talking about. Why am I drawing a blank now? I keep wanting to say shroomology, but it's not shroomology. Shroomery. Sorry, thank you. Total brain
Shimmery.
fart. All right, MycoGeeky had a brain fart. Sorry, guys, I'm only human. Um, he was saying he was on Shroomery and everybody was so mean, and he made a comment of, man, like this person you're being mean to, you don't know if they're like a day away from committing suicide. Like
Wow.
you don't know any of these people that you're being so mean to. So like just that was not the space he was trying to be in for all those reasons. And I think that's really important, that I'm identifying a lot more people are here for healing. And so we really, if there's ever been a time to remember the ego death you might have experienced while using uh, psilocybin, it's now, and it's probably going to continue to be more that way, where we just really have to be great ambassadors for what we're all about, so that people come in and have a good experience and want to actually get to that first macrodose experience and see what it can do for them.
Absolutely. I'm here for that. There's some people who won't even sell their genetics. You have to gift them. I
Right.
mean, there's
Yes.
particular genetics that you cannot buy. You have
Yep.
to be gifted them. And I think that's so beautiful,
I
to
agree.
create that kind of a rule. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm here for that stuff.
Yeah, and there are, so I also deal with people who, because I sell a sterilizer on Etsy, they'll message me and be like, "Well, I want to buy a sterilizer, but I also want some genetics because I can't get them here in my country." And yeah, some people can't get spores. So um yeah, I think the whole spread the spores concept is an important concept, and sure, people should be compensated to some degree for their time. I don't think that we all have to turn into just, selfless, uh, doing every waking second, working tirelessly for this, and never charging a cent for anything. Obviously, that's not self-sustaining. We all have to pay our rent. We all have to pay our car note. We all have to pay our light bill. And we definitely got to pay our cell phone bill because, oh my God, if we didn't have a cell phone, what would we do, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, there's a point where you're going, okay, am I exploiting people or am I just trying to, sustain what I'm trying to do here? So I think that's important. And I love that you are still doing it 3 years in.
Yeah.
Three
And had to find
years.
what works for me. I mean, I didn't give up. I'm still here.
Yes. So going forward with SoulDive, is there any like big dreams, big hopes, next steps? Like what goes through your mind when you're thinking, so where do I go from here? Like what am I going to be doing in 5 years, 3 years?
Hopefully in 3 to 5 years, this cultivation is at home accessible. I do believe in therapeutic settings. I do. And I do believe doing this in front of licensed therapists or certified therapists, whatever. I believe in that.
Yeah.
But it's not for everyone. There's some people who can't even get to a therapy office. There's some people like you and I who don't prefer settings or with other people.
Right.
And that's okay too. Each of these ways, how you do this, there's no wrong way to do it.
Right.
But I do believe in accessibility.
Yeah.
That is really just that term and that concept is just sits with my heart, making it accessible to people. And so that is my goal with Soul Dive, is making this at home cultivation for whatever type of medicine that you can safely do at home, and making that accessible for people.
Yeah, because I mean, like you just said so well, there are some people who the thought of, do you want to pay thousands of dollars, sit in a room surrounded by people, a room that's not your room, it's not your bedroom, it's not your living room, it's just this artificial room you're going to go in and have this experience. And that is, there will be some people who will only want to have the experience that way. And that's great. But like you just said, there are people who absolutely 100% will not want that. And so to make it accessible and appropriate for everybody, there will have to be multiple ways to interface and have that experience. So I could not agree with you more. That is my whole agenda, is for people who want to grow mushrooms at home, whether it's actives or medicinal mushrooms or even gourmet mushrooms, but form a relationship with mushrooms and enjoy the health benefits that come from that.
Yeah, exactly. You put that perfectly. Thank you.
So one more question. Um so cultivation in and of itself, what does it mean to you? Because you early on you said, I am a cultivator. You like gave yourself that name. Um for me, the cultivation is, it's its own therapy in many ways. It's taught me a lot about myself. Do you want to spend a little bit of time just talking about how the cultivation has its own rewards intrinsic to that process?
That is such a good topic because um, the moment that I discovered mushrooms and had that moment with the medicine, I stepped into these Facebook groups, and man, there's so many hobbyists. And I could see that I discovered that a lot of the hobbyists were in recovery or recovering from some type of substance abuse. And so they traded in their substance abuse for cultivating mushrooms.
Yeah.
Literally, you're an instant hobbyist.
Hmm.
And there's so many of them. And personally, I am a hobbyist, and became a cultivator, and just that alone, spending my time with this process was incredibly rewarding. And I think a lot of cultivators could tell you this, like, just simply the process alone is therapeutic. I don't know how to explain why or where it comes from. I don't know if there's some scientific thing for it. I haven't particularly heard people who cultivate cannabis say those same things, but I know with mushrooms and mycology, that is the thing, that cultivating mushrooms is like therapy. So it's like a multiple, like layered process. Like, yes, you get the medicine, and yes, you can share it with others, but the whole process of it is therapy in itself. And so that's what I discovered for myself, and that's what I discovered when I stepped into these Facebook groups and these different platforms, that people had put down their substance abuse and turned to therapeutic process of cultivating.
Yeah, it kind of just all works together. It's it is the experience, and then the macro experience and the micro experience and the cultivation experience, that sum total. And I don't know about you, but every time I got a mushroom pop up in my grow tent, I mean, it is just about as exciting as it was the very first time I saw one. You just form a relationship with them. You can't help it. Um, and I have never grown cannabis, but I think you're probably right. I don't think I've ever heard anybody. I got a lot of friends who cultivate both, but they do seem to have a more reverent attitude towards the cultivation of the mushrooms for some reason. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, maybe they'll do some studies and find out later, like, oh, this is what it is. But it's pretty incredible, what even if you don't take the mushrooms, just the process
Yeah.
of cultivating them is just beautiful.
Well, that's what we need. We need the people like the prudish fuddy-duddies who don't want to do mushrooms. They can still grow them, and then maybe through that process get to a point where they go, all right, fine, let's give this a try and see what this is all about.
Right. Either way, it's working from two different angles of therapy.
Yeah. Well, we are coming up on our time here for the segment. It was pretty great getting to sit down and talk to you. I love hearing all the different ways that people get into the cultivation and experiencing of cubensis mushrooms, and can't be more impressed with what you're doing, and look forward to seeing where SoulDive goes. And we'll have to have you on in the future here and see how things are going. How about that?
I love it. Thank you so much for
Cool.
having me. This is a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. So I know you are currently working on a website. It
Mhm.
might or might not be up by the time we pop this up on the air, but either way, it will be in the description as soon as it's live. So if you guys want to check her out, that'll be available shortly. And until next time, thank you so much, and happy mushroom growing, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, MycoGeeky.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
All right, guys. So it's about that time for a little deep science with Ed Gran. There we go. Deep science. We definitely need a theme song. We'll get there. Give us, give me a minute. It's on my list of things to do. Anyway, so without further ado, let's welcome to the show Ed Gran. What's up, man?
Hello, how you doing?
Good. How you doing? All right. Let me
Pretty good.
pull up your overlay. All right, you're
Right.
official.
All right. I was
All
right.
right.
Post-it note.
Well, yeah. One goes away, two more have to enter the scene. I know how it goes.
Exactly what I was doing.
Yes.
Yep.
So we were talking, guys, and so I thought it might be cool to talk a little bit about Ed's channel, how it's going, kind of, some things that's kind of organically happening with it, and then we'll kind of go from there. So Ed, why don't you just kind of give people lay of the land, how the channel's going right now, what you think about it, ups and downs, all that kind of stuff.
Right now I think it's going pretty good. Nothing but positivity. I'm really quite
Nice.
surprised after a lot of the other media, social media.
Hmm.
The uh not all bad, but the YouTube people are really nice, and someone
Awesome.
kind of explained it to me that if they're willing to watch like a 10 or 15-minute video, they're probably gonna say nice things. If
Right.
not, they would have clicked off and gone to other, go to what I don't know, wherever Reddit or wherever people say nasty stuff.
That's one
Uh,
of the places, yes,
but
for sure.
but all the YouTube people are quite nice, and I get a lot of ideas. In fact, that's what I was writing a post-it note was about because I was just looking at a YouTube video, and
Nice.
I get lots of ideas. So the more people that comment and the more people that have questions, I have like probably like a 2-page document of just video ideas. I thought when I first started it was going to be maybe 10, 15 videos. I think I'm up to like 60 now, and
Yeah, man.
I haven't even got started on the real like mushroom identification stuff yet.
I know.
So like field identification of mushrooms and different genera and microscopy and spore color and dichotomous
Right.
keys, and like I've got a list of.
We're
I'm just
ready.
stick-
It's
I,
gonna
I
happen.
it's coming. It's
Yes.
coming. I'm sticking with the kind of like the baby cube stuff now, and but I've
Nice.
got like tons of other mushroom stuff in my head too.
Well, I can tell you this on my Discord, you definitely have a nice little cult following. Now I will say this.
I've
I
always
can
wanted a cult.
I continue to enjoy yes, you gotta grow the beard out a little bit, yes, for sure. And wear a robe. The
Yeah,
more
maybe
you look like Alan Watts, the
some
better.
some weird symbols, some
Yes.
astrological stuff back there.
All you have to do is create a unique symbol and you'll be well on your way for sure.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it.
But so what I was going to say is some people in the Discord, there's still an occasion where somebody gets very excited because they have a hypothesis, and then old Ed comes in and he's like, well, actually, nope, that's not the case whatsoever, and here's 5 articles you can read, and then that just sort of gets shut down. Now what I'm ready for is the day when everybody's reading all of these and
Um,
then engages more completely. But to that end, I think your YouTube channel is accomplishing some of that. It's you're becoming a resource, you're
mm,
answering questions, you're giving people stuff to think about. And there are a few guys in the Discord that I think it's had a positive impact on, and they really love engaging with the content you send them and stuff
sure.
like that. So it's good. Now to that end, Ed had mentioned that he has like a 2 or 3 page list of things to talk about on the podcast, of which he sent me. So why don't we just get into it? So somebody, I guess, sent him a very well formulated list of all their questions. So
Mm.
whoever you are out there,
I can't
thank you.
remember right now who it was. Sorry, whoever it was. Yes, they actually
We'll
took the
figure it out.
time to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
I'll try
figure
to
it out.
remember.
But anyway, thank you for doing that because now we have some questions we can discuss on the podcast. So, all right. So, the beginning of this says some of these are for my curiosity, some are coming up because I've been having a stupid high contam rate and I'm trying to figure out why. Ha ha, ha ha ha. So, first question, Ed, here we go. Some people have said they fixed their contam issues by switching grain or changing brands. Why would brand or batch of grain matter? That's the first question. Why would the brand, why would a batch matter?
This is an excellent question, and this is why I didn't reply to that person right away because I wanted to save it for this so that much more people can hear at least my version of the answer. Uh, okay, so here basically we've got a selection of grain. We got wheat, we've got millet, we got milo, all sorghum, all that. I don't even know they got buckets of them. Basically I use paddy rice, and the reason why I use paddy rice is because the millet here is so dirty. It's literally like meant to be fed to birds and animals, and it's not very good quality. So the rice that I have available is actually could be used for human consumption. It's just basically old. It's kind of like popcorn. It's made for human consumption, so they kind of make an effort to clean it a little bit. Because it's basically last year's crop of rice. If you know about rice, it gets kind of stale or whatever, like a bag of chips or whatever would it. So they turn it into basically chicken food. So it was human quality like 6 months ago, and now it's chicken quality. So I get it for really cheap. When I switched from millet to that paddy rice, no contamination. Like my contamination went away. And the other people that I know here, I've tried to convince them that millet, at least here in Thailand, is not the way. It's just too dirty. So when people talk about like the oats that you get at say like a Tractor Supply place, and some people have joked about they literally like sweep them off the floor, that might not be a good starting material. If you're having trouble with that, maybe go to popcorn, maybe go to wheat. You know, the wheat in the US, it's fairly expensive considering it's probably made for animals. But it's usually like leftover stuff. It's like, class B or second class or whatever. And so it was harvested and processed probably to make bread. So again, if you go to wheat or something like that, it might be cleaner. So just switch up your grains. And as we all know, like the grain is kind of, I mean, this may be an overstatement, but the type of grain is not your contamination issue. It's what's like the stuff in the grain, the residual stuff. And if you're not doing a proper cook and a proper sterilization, i.e., like you're not, if you're doing a no soak, no simmer, and you're throwing it straight into a pressure cooker, and maybe you're only doing it for an hour and a half, it's still contaminated. A quick way to test that, you just leave one, say you do 4 or 5 bags, leave one or two of them out. Just let them sit there on the counter in the same, like right next to your spawn bags that you've inoculated. Could be LC, could be agar, could be whatever. Leave one of those bags. That's what's called a control, right? So any type of experiment, if you're having trouble with contamination, leave one of those bags out. Treat it exactly the same as you would, um, as your inoculated stuff, and just let it sit there. And I did it with my popcorn when I switched over to popcorn about 3 or 4 months ago. Well, I go back and forth. It's whatever, playing around. Um, yeah, I let a bag of popcorn sit for like 3 months, and it just stayed there. And then after 3 months, I inoculated it, and it grew perfectly fine. That's when so you can eliminate, problems with maybe your sterilization times or maybe a leaky pressure cooker, or maybe you've got insects. Guy I was talking to yesterday had like mites and like flies and stuff all around his bags. That's not good. So if you eliminate all of those things by just simply having a control there, if your control bag that you've done nothing to and you haven't cut it open, you haven't jabbed a hole in it with a needle, if that goes bad, well, then it was either your pressure or your sterilization or the grain. So then you can try 2 grains. So next time you do your PC cycle, try a popcorn and an oats, or try a no soak, no simmer and a cook. And just mess with it. So you have to eliminate one variable at a time. That's what people who maybe don't have a real heavy like science background, you don't understand. You can't change like 3 variables in one go. You have to eliminate one variable at a time systematically. That's like what science is called. Like, so you have a
Yeah,
control
no,
and the
you say that, and that's exactly the problem with a lot of newbies is they
yes.
start out and they don't do one tech. They go,
Yeah.
well, right out of the gate, I'm going to grow the hardest to grow species. I'm going to grow
Uh,
in bags. I'm going to do this. I'm going to amend it with this. And it's like, but you didn't just start simple first and make sure all
yeah.
those core foundational things are where they need to be. Yeah.
It's a long, hard road if you do that. If you start changing even 2 variables in one go, you're going to have a long, hard road and a lot of failure to figure out what's wrong. Like you said, if you've got like a substrate that you're messing around with, you supplement with poo or you know cat whatever you dug up off the forest floor or whatever, cat poop or whatever you're putting in there. You can't do that. Don't do that. Just grow with like CV. Everybody's doing CV, or just quar and grain spawn. It'll work. Just
I
do
mean,
it.
if you start with just cocoa coir, you've
Yes, just
you've then
just quar and spawn.
you want to blame something. There's only one thing to blame,
Exactly.
right?
Which speaking of that, the trick problem with the cannabis growers, if you get like quar that has trick already in it, they're pre-inoculated, supposedly mycorrhizal trichoderma in there already. I have a problem here with quar because the manufacturer, sometimes their quality control is up and down. So if you want to blame quar, that's like a whole another 30 minutes, because you can talk about the EC, the electrical conductivity, contaminants, maybe there's the hydration ratios, your field capacity. That could be like a whole other half hour, but Maybe we should go.
It's a whole other, series necessarily.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But now, so for a lot of people that come in, they come in from cannabis, and so they probably have coir sitting around. So they go, "Cool, I'm just gonna use
Yes.
this coir," and they don't
Yes.
realize you might want to look at that label and see if it's pre-inoculated with anything. And
Yeah. Or they recycle their coir from their cannabis grow. Don't do that. Don't do
Right.
that. You guys, coir is not, it's biodegradable. You're not like killing the earth by like
Right.
buying a brick of coir. Believe me, I live in Thailand. They've got like piles of it
Yes.
outside. It's not going anywhere except for in a bag to ship to America or a landfill or a
Right.
fire pit. Like
Right.
there's
Well,
no shortage.
just continues to be organic matter in the ground.
It's
No.
carbon fixation, man.
Yes,
Literally, it's
yes.
carbon fixation. You're helping pull CO2 out of the air and fixing it.
All right, so we'll keep going. The first question, the second part of it, because in a continued quest for this guy to figure out his high contam rate. So that sort of explains Brandon batch of grain. Then he says, shouldn't it be sterile after the PC cycle, no matter what it is?
Yeah, that's a good point. It should be. That being said, if you're trying to if you're trying to sterilize popcorn that's only partially hydrated, the steam and the pressure is not going to get inside. So there's a lot of caveats there. You have to have the right grain, the right PC time. You have to have a PC that gets to the right pressure. Mine only goes to 11 psi, so I run for 3 hours. Now, if you got like something that goes to like 17 or 20 psi, you might be able to get away with an hour. That being said, you have to have grain that's properly hydrated because dry grain and those endospores, like a lot of people like to do the pre-soak for 12 or 24 hours. The whole reason for that is to get those endospores or anything else in there, could be other fungi, to germinate. And then you kill them after they've germinated because they're a lot easier to kill. So that's the idea there. So yeah, if you have
Yeah,
the
it's
grain,
kind of like a turtle, right? It's like if a
Mm,
turtle is hiding in its shell, you can
yeah,
kick it around. I mean, maybe you can run it over with your car, but it's essentially in its little protective shell. The minute it peeks its head out, bam, you can punch it in the face.
yeah, yeah.
That's
I
what
almost
you're
got
trying to do.
I almost got in a car accident one time. I actually hit a turtle and it like bumped
Oh my
my
God.
car jumped like 2 feet off the road. I'm sorry,
No,
turtle.
wait, no, was this Michigan or was this Thailand?
Yeah,
Yeah,
out
Michigan. Sounds like a
Waterloo,
Michigan
man.
thing.
It was a snapping
Yeah.
turtle and they've got shells. They're like a rock.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah, they'll pop your tires.
Well, so what you just brought up, I don't know if I've heard anybody talk about that, where if you're not properly hydrating the grain, some of these
Yeah.
endospores can kind of hide out in that dry portion.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
You've really got to get the grain hydrated, and I know because I've messed around with the no soak thing, trying to save time. The other thing,
Mhm.
guys, grain prep is the most important thing of making spawn. There is no shortcuts to it, really. The no soak, no simmer stuff, you guys, I don't know, man. I don't think it's for a beginner. Like if you're gonna cook pasta for your spaghetti, you might as well cook your grain, right? Like what grain, it takes an hour, 45 minutes to cook it. If it's millet, maybe 10 minutes of boiling water.
Yeah.
If you're going to be doing this process for like a month, right? So an
Right.
hour of boiling popcorn is kind of irrelevant. So like, and also you can save on the PC time. And to top it off, you won't end up throwing away 7 bags of grain like a week
Right.
later. So
Yes.
people try to cut corners and they're trying to save time and money. The problem is if all that ends up in the garbage, you haven't saved any money or time.
Or time. Yes.
Right? That's the
It's
whole
true.
way. Do it right the first time, like they say in woodworking, right? Measure once, cut what? Measure twice, cut once. Is
Yeah.
that it?
Yeah.
Measure twice,
Measure
cut once.
twice, cut once.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
if it's me, measure 14 times and
Exactly.
still hesitate for that first cut. Yes.
Exactly. And get
Yes.
another tape measure. Maybe that one got bent or you stepped on it
Oh,
or
100%. Well, no, in woodworking, you want a trusty, you want the same tape measure throughout the entire project.
There's another good
Yes.
point.
Yes, you
Exactly.
want the same tape
Consistency.
measure.
Yes, consistency. So and when you do figure out your PC cycle or whatever, don't mess with it.
Yeah.
Like just figure it out and then like just try not to mess with it too much. Like I did that. I figured out that 3 hours worked. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I can get away with 2 hours and a half. And then no. Just
Right.
like gas isn't that expensive and like
Yeah.
it's a lot of work
Now,
waste.
so somebody on the Discord talked one time, there are apparently Wi-Fi temperature probes. So
Oh
you
yeah.
can put a probe in your pressure cooker and it will give you, the real-time data of the temperature. So if you're really like a data nerd and you really want to figure out what's going on and dial in your time, go for it. As a general rule, I have been hearing,
Totally.
3 hours is kind of a magic number for
Yeah.
a lot of people.
They quote those things about microbiology, and they'll usually say a half an hour at 15 psi or even 15 minutes, but that's for liquid media that's specific for E. coli, right? They're not talking about grains. They're talking about liquid media that's fully dissolved, and it's
Right.
also very, very processed. So it's not dirty to begin with. But if you're talking about like oats swept off like a barnyard, or like a floor of a factory, they're going to be dirty. So 3 hours isn't that long. Like I say, you're gonna be
Right.
doing this process for like a month. So
Yeah.
like, why not just, I don't know, just make sure you set a timer or whatever. The people that do atmospheric pressure sterilization too, they run for like 24 hours,
Oh
and
yeah.
they'll put those probes inside, because they might have like 50 or 100 bags in those bubble barrels or whatever.
Right.
And you got to make damn sure that that center temperature gets up to whatever, I don't know, whatever they get it up to, 210 or 212 or whatever.
Oh yeah, they won't even, the probe won't even just be in the center of the barrel. It'll usually get jabbed into
Yeah,
a bag,
in
the
bags.
centermost bag that they're going to throw away, but at least then they know that if they hit
Exactly.
temperature on this bag, they've hit it everywhere else. Yeah.
That's it,
Yeah.
man. It's worth sacrificing that one bag. So like the control bag too, if you only got 7 bags in your Presto or whatever, one of those bags, man, you could still, if it's still good 2 weeks later, you just inoculate that. It's not garbage. It's just you're making sure like that control. It's not. And if not, you just give it to the birds or whatever.
Just give it to the squirrels.
Squirrels.
Yeah. Oh,
They'll be
my squirrels are
confused.
fat. They are fat and they're happy, just like Dave Wombat squirrels. Yes.
My squirrels just wander around aimlessly.
Yeah.
They get fed too much.
Bump into each other, lay on their backs, looking.
Can't climb the trees. Yeah, exactly.
Can't climb anymore. Yeah.
Sound like Terrence McKenna, like, well, and I eat the nuts.
Yeah.
I can't do a Terrence.
Yes. Well, yeah, I got to work on my Terrence. It's a little nasally.
Yeah,
a
you
little
maybe have to.
hyper-poetic.
Yeah, now we can talk more slowly.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, you're
have
getting there.
You have to enter the space-time continuum with the gnome and the machine elves.
Oh, that's a solid B+ right there. I like it. All right, so that sorry, we're gonna go off on a Terrence McKenna tangent here, real fast. So should it be sterile? Theoretically, yes, but there's a bunch of confounding factors. I think that what you were bringing up about the soak. So I did when I was doing no soak, no simmer, and I got a tech dialed in where I wasn't losing jars too often, but I would I would mix my grain and my water. I would let it sit overnight, and then I would PC it the next day. So it was getting a chance to do some of that, germination and all that stuff. But yeah,
is that with millet or Milo?
I did it with
millet.
Yeah, with millet.
Yeah, it'll work with that. Popcorn, no, you can't.
The hull's too hard.
Nah, no way.
So
I don't even think wheat. I think it'll work, but I don't know about oats. I haven't really used oats. Millet, Milo, and probably sorghum. I've never worked with sorghum.
Yeah, well, for here that's the same as Milo, but yeah.
Oh, is it? Oh. Yeah.
So
just do rice.
I think that's why I like the popcorn now. I got my time dialed in where that pressure cook phase, I know it is getting all my grains hydrated because I'll have a small percentage of burst grains. So it just lets me know that odds are there's probably no grain in that pot that isn't fully hydrated. And so I think that's the big takeaway for me from what you just said is you definitely should be on a quest to not have a dry spot in the center of your grains.
Yeah, I don't know if the burst grains are a problem either.
No,
I burst grains all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, with my rice, it's kind of weird because it has the hull still on it. So I inevitably get, I'd say probably 20% of the grains are literally like plopped out, and I never ever have a problem. Again, that's back to the same idea. Like you just said, you know it's hydrated inside.
And yes, if it
The
pops.
burst grains are not a problem. The problem is if you have too much liquid and it forms like liquid water at the bottom.
Right.
If you're using mason jars and you had liquid water at the bottom, that's where the problem would come in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Alright,
not
so-
the actual.
All right, so let's go on to the next one here. So, second question from this guy. Spawning to bulk is a non-sterile process, but I read about people bleaching their bins or wiping with an alcohol rag. Why would that matter? So let me say this last thing he says. Why would that matter since there's contam everywhere anyway, including in the bulk substrate?
That's a good question and something that is very easy to answer, but doesn't seem that obvious to a beginner. Never, ever, ever use a Scotch Brite or something rough to clean your tubs. And if you're going to do this, never use any kind of like abrasive stuff. Like plastic from the manufacturer is relatively clean and sterile. The only thing in your tubs you need to do is wipe them with a soft sponge or even spray them with alcohol and paper towels. Like you're not really cleaning them. And I hear a lot of people like saying, "Oh, I don't use liners." The liners are not necessarily for those side pins and all that crap. It's so you can clean them easily. If you're gonna spend $8 or $10 on a mono tub or even a shoebox, you want to just basically be able to dump out the substrate, give it a wipe with a soft sponge, and that's it basically. If you're in there with like a Scotch Brite or whatever they call them, like a Brillo pad, and you're scrubbing your tub, you should just buy a new tub because that's where the contamination, especially if you're not using liners. And I see people doing this bucket tech in like the bucket tech in those big thermoses, like those big cooler, like igloo coolers. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like the same igloo cooler you use for your fishing stuff and your like beers on the softball team, and like just get a new bucket. They're cheap.
Sure.
Use a new bucket. Like try to splurge and maybe get a new bucket and just dedicate that for your mycology stuff.
Yes.
For the bucket tech, just get a freaking new bucket.
Right.
Like don't recycle some crap out of the garbage, the dumpster. Get new
No.
tubs.
Yeah. It's
Here's
so
the thing,
cheap.
you can use the tubs for stuff later. Like if you get a shoebox, you can use it for mycology first and use it for your shoes later.
Right.
But don't use it for your shoes first and then your mycology stuff, right?
I would
Bad
hope
idea.
no one is doing that.
People do. I know, man, recycling and upcycling goes
Yes.
a long way, but not for mycology.
Now, I'm going
Like-
to tell you something that you just said about, only using a soft sponge to clean your tubs and all that. Because my guess is the point you're making is the minute you scarify that surface, you've now given it somewhere for little things to latch on and makes it harder for them to clean. Almost like giving your tubs cavities, basically.
Yeah,
These
exactly.
little pockets. Now, there's a correlation that I experienced back in the day when I was building furniture, and there was a Beverly Hills art fair, and I took a bunch of really fancy cutting boards and some custom furniture there, and thought, cool, this would be a way for me to sell my business to some more people from Bel Air and all that stuff. And somebody was there giving me a real hard time about using wooden cutting boards and how unsanitary they were. And then another chef from the area, who was a chef, apparently, I forget the restaurant, but at a pretty nice restaurant in the area, he actually got in a debate with the guy saying, actually, you're completely wrong. Because the other guy was like, no, you got to use a plastic cutting board. So I'm just watching these two argue. And the chef was like, no, actually, a wooden cutting board is better, because he goes into the detail about how these BPA-free plastic cutting boards get all these micro perforations in them, and the colonization of bacteria proliferates like in these little channels. And he just went on. And he was like, you'll actually find that most chefs, like very high-end chefs, will use a wooden cutting board for this reason, because the fibers on the wood want to go back together. They want to like seal back up. So he had this whole spiel he went into. But man, if that guy hadn't showed up, I would have believed the other guy and said, oh, well, I'm a horrible person. I made wooden cutting boards and I'm going to kill everyone with them. But it's more complicated than all that.
The domestic terrorists.
Yes, the domestic terrorists. But so your point is good, because I remember one time I was making liners on my fancy 32 quart, gasketed sterilites that I'd spent so much time drilling holes out of. And I lined it, and then I thought, oh, I'm going to save some time. I'm just going to take an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to cut the excess liner off. And then when I got done harvesting the tub, I'm like, oh, now I got these ugly lines here from
Yeah.
cutting it. So I stopped doing that, because mostly I didn't even think about it being a place to harbor contamination, but it just didn't look good. And I thought, well, over time, this is just going to make my tubs look like crap.
I just did it yesterday. I was cutting my liner with a razor blade. I nicked the side, and I was like, oh no, like it's not the pristine, like virginal plastic surface that it was.
But
Yeah,
you
those
make a good point that the surface of those, injection molded tubs, that's a very smooth surface and can be cleaned simply by just wiping it down. Or
Exactly.
all I do is I just spray once I get the gross dirt or whatever out, I just spray it with Inside or isopropyl alcohol. I put the top on and I just let it air dry, and
Yep,
I know
that's exactly what I do.
killed
Exactly.
everything.
And if you get in there and start scrubbing it, you'll just make it almost more dirty sometimes, right?
I think you're
It's
right.
like you're not mashing it down in there.
Right. In those corners, man.
Oh,
The
I know.
corners are the worst. Yes, you are. It's like wiping your eye, right? Like somebody will get something in their eye, and then they start rubbing it, and now they're taking the object in their eye and they're just abrading their cornea. They're just
Yeah,
scratching their
yes.
cornea back and forth.
Yep,
Okay, guys, these are life lessons.
exactly.
All right,
Probably when you see a man in the Tupperware aisle and they're like doing this with like a mono tub, like
right.
it's because they're like looking. They're a mushroom
Yes.
grower, probably.
Yes.
They're looking at that corner and how easy that corner is going to be to clean when they
100%.
that like.
Yes. I tell you what, man, there's still an opportunity, because my max yield bin is fancy. I honestly don't use it that often, but if somebody came up with just an exceptionally easy to clean, like where it had really large sweeping corners.
Yeah, like in
Man.
old, like the skateboarding videos with the pools that are just like
yes.
a
The
smooth
bowls.
transition. Exactly.
The bowl. That's what we need to start growing, and just straight up Tupperware bowls, dude.
Maybe just bowl. The
Let's
bowl.
try it, guys.
Oh,
Whoever wants to try
great
bowl tech,
idea.
let's get it going and see what's happening. Maybe we got a new invention here. All right, let's do one more here. We're coming up on some
Write
time.
that down.
All right, so the third question here, he says, I've never had a jar go green on me. Only green shows up after spawning to bulk, and lately always before the first flush. I can also agree that tends to be how mine had happened in the past. Can trichoderma be present in a jar but not show itself until mixed with sub? Great question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question because I'm sure everybody's had that. I think the easy answer is that the trick is already there. When you break and shake, you've distributed it, and also you've given that white, because trick starts out white. And so that mycelium, you could literally have a jar of like white trick and not even know it. Like trick looks like a lot like mycelium, especially in a jar, especially with not much experience. And then you shake it and you give it oxygen. And then you've also like kind of basically given it that sort of impetus to like, because they're going to sporulate when they're stressed, right? So if trick's waiting there growing vegetatively, it's got all this nutrition. You shake it and it thinks it's the same thing we do when we put like substrate and casing. They're like, oh crap, we got to sporulate, which for our babies is to make a fruit body. But for trick, that's to make like canidia, with those green spores.
Green nastiness,
Yeah.
Sporulated.
So you shake it, and then maybe even if you shake it and you just maybe you don't do it at the right time, or you do it maybe 10 minutes before you spawn to bulk, and then like 3 or 4 days later you start to see, wow, it's growing really fast, and then it turns green the next day. Yeah, that's because you've basically given it a bunch of oxygen, you put it under stress, and the trick mycelium that was already there is like, wow, time to like sporulate. And
that's fascinating. I used to always think, well, yeah, I shake my jar and I'm weakening the mycelial network of my fungus, which
Hmm.
gives the trichoderma a chance to do its thing. But I hadn't thought about how the stress response to both, one is a mushroom and one is just a bunch of sporulating.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
So
the same way I used to think about it, like you too. Like, why would I stress or break the mycelium? But then when I started to think about it, and I was like, oh wait, yeah, because if the mycelium is healthy, it should bounce back,
it'll bounce back.
and
And
you
pretty
should.
fast. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
pretty
yeah,
fast.
dude. I've gotten to the point now where I'll break up my bags and let them sit for 3 days,
Yep.
and
And they
if
should be
nothing,
back
yep,
100%.
if nothing's happening after 3 days, it goes in the garbage, and I don't even bother with it
I
because you
do
got
the
to
same.
think. Yeah, it's if you're gonna make up your substrate and you're gonna go through all that effort, and I spend a lot of time, making my cakes all nice and even and all that
Right.
stuff. If you're gonna do all that time with a bag of like crappy spawn, it's better just to throw it in the garbage and not waste your time. Like,
Now, no offense to Dave Wombat, who does that regularly, and thank you for doing that, Dave, because we have all sorts of fun things like chocolate crinkle brains and whatnot to play with as a result. But yes, generally speaking, for the average person coming into the community who just
mhm,
wants to grow, their first tub or some of their first tubs, and they want wins, I cannot stress enough that I do 2 break and shakes. I know a lot of people who don't. I usually do one, and it really doesn't matter exactly where you do it. Roughly for
nah,
me, 20 to
doesn't matter.
40%. And all that first shake for me is just to redistribute because my agar
Mhm.
chunks are only going in so many spots. So that break and shake just redistributes more inoculation points so that second phase goes a lot faster. But then my last break and shake, which I try to usually do it close to 100 or darn near 100. If there's just a couple random grains that aren't quite fully colonized, that's fine. But generally speaking, 98 to 100% colonized, I shake that one, and 2 days, 3 days tops, if that stuff is not fully white, like blizzard white again, I don't even mess with it. I just move on. I don't even smell it. I just
Yep,
toss it.
exactly. It's that exactly.
Because I
Uh,
can't always trust the smell. Now, gross, bacterial contamination of certain types of bacteria smell pretty rancid or pretty like fermented, but they don't always smell bad.
Yeah, and it's better not even to expose your grow area or
Yeah,
your nose even to it for
right.
that matter. If it's
Yes,
not doing anything after 3 days, it's not going to come back. And
it's at least very weak. Yeah, compared to other
yeah,
things.
and unless you're really, really hurting or you're on your last bag of that
Yeah,
specific cross or whatever, that's not worth it. But if it's bacterial, like maybe like some people like Dave do, I do that too. But the bacterial is a little bit different too. That like maybe you could run that, but I wouldn't do it unless you're really, really like hurting for like a new tub or whatever. Like,
or you're just fiending. You just need to see a fruit. Yeah, where you're just like, I just want to
yeah,
see a fruit from this.
you can do that on accident plenty of times. You don't have to purposely do it.
Correct. That will occur.
It
There's
should not
nothing
be
you
your
can do to prevent it.
yes.
Yes,
You'll see that after like 6 months of growing. You'll see that a
yes,
bunch of times. You don't have to do it on purpose.
it's true. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about how in the beginning, if you have a relatively new home and it's relatively clean and you kind of follow directions, you might go 6 months to a year and have everything go well. But then eventually, you're buying genetics, you're bringing things into your space, you're
Yeah.
growing things.
We
Eventually, over time, your hobby will generate some contamination.
mhm.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right, I got.
get rid of your garbage fast too. If you
Oh,
do
yeah.
have a contaminant, do not let it sit in like your kitchen in the garbage. Get it outside.
Yeah, yeah,
For
for
sure.
sure.
I like it like a small garbage bin like
Wait,
dedicated to your
did you
garbage.
just say put it in your kitchen garbage? Oh my God. Never, Ed. I would never do that.
No, I do, and then I if you want to poison,
No,
maybe if you want to kill somebody who uses the kitchen,
no,
might
no,
be
no.
not keep
Straight
crisp.
outside. I do, dude. You should see me when I identify I mean, lately I'm getting pretty good. It's not doing it, but if I see anything
Same
that
here.
looks green, I mean,
I'm
I
in
am
one hand, like
feelining outside the
mhm.
periphery of my property, and I am dumping that bag out. And I also brought a bottle of inside insecticide, whatever it is, and I spray that entire bag inside and out. and then I dispose of it in my garbage. I am not playing. I've worked too hard to not deal with this stuff. It's
Yeah.
gone. It dies. All right, so
Sure, man.
let's see if we can get another question or two in here. Fourth question. I read about embedded bacteria. I've been confident in my agar
Oh,
work, but I came back to the hobby now after a 2-year break, and I'm starting to doubt myself. Trust me, dude. Everybody feels this way. People who act like they don't have these problems, they're just not telling you the truth.
yep.
Mycophilia on YouTube has a video on embedded bacteria. I'm unsure if his video is actual or not, but I'm seeing some issues similar to that. Here's the link. And then talks of embedded bacteria start at blah, 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 blah. We'll put the link in the description. I saw that. I have not watched it, but it looked like a cool topic. So maybe let's just hear your thoughts on embedded bacteria.
Yeah, I watched the video, but I'm trying to remember. He's got a lot of them. Embedded bacteria. I think what he means is bacteria sticking to the mic, right? So you get the halo. Somebody was just asking me earlier that's this sort of weird where you can see mycelium, and even when you subculture it will keep growing, and it looks like it's growing at the normal rate, but you get this sort of halo. Broccoli and then trench sequestration. Ooh, that's a hard one to say.
Ooh, that
Um,
sounds fancy, Ed.
yeah, I posted a link. I found one of the sort of original papers about it. They call it cabinet sequestration, where you cut like a hole. If you ever see Breaking Bad, you remember Jesse in the hole. Like you basically make a hole in the agar and you put your new transfer in the center of that little square, and the mic from the transfer will basically crawl out and up the sides. And I didn't even think about it. This sounds stupid, but the grab and drag technique, somebody mentioned that kind of is a trench sequestration by default. I didn't even think about it. And then I was joking. So basically, if you have what you think is embedded or piggybacking bacteria, just take your transfer and cut a square in your agar around it, and it'll make like a gap of maybe a millimeter or two when it kind of dries out a bit. And that mycelium will hopefully jump. And that's the idea, is that bacteria they're not like linear,
They're not
mycelium.
modal. They don't.
Modal, yeah.
Unless they have flagella,
Yeah.
they're kind of stuck where they're at to a
Yep.
greater. Unless there's fluid dynamics at play, they essentially freaking sit there. They're lazy. Let's be honest. They might proliferate, but they cannot leap
They're not
across
gonna
1
fly
millimeter
over.
chasms. Yeah, they're just.
Yeah, and it's the same idea with water agar, is that you're trying to basically feed off that initial nutrient source of the transfer. But the thing is, with the trench or cabinet sequestration, it's way, way easier. And you can just use your normal media. Like literally, I did it the other day just for fun, and all my transfers that day, I was kind of bored. Like I only worked like 3 hours in the hood. I didn't have anything to do. So I cut little rectangles around some of the ODPE stuff that looks a bit funny. And so I was just like, what the heck? I'll just do a little sequestration here around all my transfers today. Brilliant. They've gapped that was like 5 days ago, and they jumped that gap, and they look so freaking perfect.
Yeah, man.
It's like
it absolutely works. There's no doubt about it.
it
works great.
Thanks to Brock for bringing that up, man. I don't know, like I kind of accidentally did it with that whole grab and drag thing, but he was the original one.
Yeah, I never thought about well, just so we don't get some people upset, because he posted too, and then somebody had to mention that really we know that he didn't invent it. Let's honestly, at this point in things, I don't know who's going to invent too many things, and even if you do, you're not going to get rich off it. You didn't invent the gas stove. This it's a pretty niche thing that we're doing here, guys. No one's going to get filthy rich inventing trench sequestration, okay?
No, man, those number 7 scalpel handles, man. That was my idea.
That was mine.
Yeah.
It's cool to be somebody, and it's, if you did come up with something novel, it's cool to be like, oh yeah, I came up with that, but then if somebody says, well, actually you didn't, somebody else was doing it, it's all good. Doesn't matter. Who cares?
I'm gonna search for the bowl tech later. It's probably out there already.
And then on the next episode, you'll be like, God dang it, Geeky! You said you invented it, and it wasn't yours. I know.
I'm gonna go flame a bunch of people. You're getting way too excited about that stuff.
Honestly, yes. Okay,
They've
so embedded bacteria. So I'll tell you my very not scientific take on it is having worked a lot of plates. I don't know. I mean, I've done this a year and a half. I bet we're talking about 15 to 20,000 plates. I could go look up how many cases of plates I bought, but it's a
up in a
freaking
lot
lot of
of them,
plates.
man.
Um, but I can tell you this: healthy mycelium has a look. You know when you have
Mm.
healthy mycelium,
Mhm.
it looks
Yes.
dry and it is filamentous and it is beautiful to look at. Even when it's tomentose, it's beautiful to look at.
Mm.
If you have anything that starts to look, quote, uglier or not just not what you think it's supposed to look like, something is probably going on. Whether it's as simple as multiple sectors fighting amongst themselves, that would be like the most benign situation.
Mhm.
But there's probably something else going on in there. So that is the perfect time to take a transfer. You could even do, if you had only one nice section where you thought, well, this is the best looking section of this plate, you could cut that piece out. You could set it on a plate, a new petri dish, and then you could cut another trench out, or you could, many ways you could do it. You could cut a little hole to set that piece in, but you could do trench sequestration then on a new plate.
Mhm.
And that's a great starting point because instead of going, oh, I need to buy this, I need to buy RIT dye, which also works.
It
Or
worked.
or I need to pour water agar, or I need to buy antibiotic plates and get gentamicin and trench. Anybody that has plates
Nah.
can do a trench. That's what's
Just
so
do, do,
great
do.
about that. Yes, it's
Exactly.
great.
It literally, it's the same plate, same media. You just
Yeah,
do it right there. And if you want to, and you want to do a transfer, put it off to the side near the edge of the plate so
right.
it can grow all the way, and then you can use the rest of the plate for your new spawn. So
Yes.
you're not like wasting a plate. With gentamicin and things like that, you're gonna have to transfer probably to a
Again,
normal
off of
plate.
yeah.
Yeah, or water agar, you're gonna have to go back to a normal plate, and it's you just do this the trench thing. One little thing to say though, if you're dealing with liquid culture, like if you're testing LC on a plate, at the beginning it may not look normal. Especially if it's been in LC.
Right.
Like I've got like jars that have been sitting around for a year. When I pull LC to test or kind of like, just like start a plate for whatever reason, it'll look funny for a while. You might have to subculture it. Don't think it's contamination and don't throw it away. Because it might just be like it's adapting back to the solid,
Right.
agar
Yeah.
surface. Also multi-spore. Multi-spore, if you're doing swabs, whatever it is, they're not going to look pretty at first. You might have to do a couple subcultures. The second thing,
Yeah. Good point.
when I do subcultures from multispore, the little serpentine thing, I'll actually
Mhm.
take a fairly large chunk and wait for the T1 and then try to pull a rhizo off that. Because it gives you more of a choice of if you have a mixed culture, there will be monocultures and you really want to get a monoculture. So when you take a bigger chunk, not that big, but maybe like 2 centimeters, it allows that's a sectoring to kind of occur on that T1 plate.
Right.
And then hopefully by T2, you've got like a monoculture. The other thing is monokaryons, not monocultures, monokaryons. Monokaryons are freaking ugly. They're just ugly. I've got some that look okay and they're tomentose, but some of them, like especially my NSS, that thing I have subcultured and I have checked it 50 times under the microscope. It is a monoculture. I've used it for like 10 crossings. It mates with everything. It is definitely a cube monoculture, monokaryon monoculture.
But
It
it's
just
not
looks
pretty.
it ugly, man. It is ugly. And every time I subculture it, I keep thinking like maybe it'll be pretty this time. No, because NSS gets overlay even when it's a dikaryon,
Right.
right?
So it's just
And it's
overlaying
ugly.
itself all the time.
And that the TAT NSS crosses that people are having trouble with on the Discord, they're ugly. NSS is
I
just
mean, I
ugly.
mean, I don't know if I'm having trouble yet. They're just not as pretty as all the
They're
others. The others
okay.
are just prettier.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're all
Yeah.
pretty in our eyes,
Yeah.
but some are prettier than others.
Yeah. So okay, you brought up something that I want to pull up. I was talking to James Cruz the other day. He just started. He tried broccoli's RIT dye plates because he had felt like maybe he had some embedded bacteria and some stuff, and he loved it. He was like, "Oh man, the growth looks so
Mm.
clean." And I had the same experience. And then I said, well, you might find sometimes, though, maybe 1 out of 10 times, that when you transfer that RIT dye plate back onto another plate, it will come back. So it doesn't always solve the problem. Just because it looks good on the RIT plate doesn't mean it's going to look good back on the other plate. So he said, oh, okay, you know, I'll pay attention for that. But then we got to talking about, he wanted to know, could he, because the motivation was, well, it looks like this RIT dye plate is cleaning up my mycelium. Can I inoculate grain with that? And I said, well, I don't know if I would, because I wouldn't drink a bottle of RIT dye, and I would worry about what might leach from that agar into the grains. And he said, well, you know, is that dose really going to be that high? So do you have any thoughts? It's probably not, right?
No. It's gonna be so minuscule, and also it'll have to leach from the transfer through the media. And I
Right.
make my spawn from the. I don't use the part where I've subcultured. Like I don't use the transfer point. So if the RIT dye from
Oh,
the
right.
but if you were using straight from the RIT
No,
dye
he's saying,
plate,
yeah, if you use, like, imagine you diced up a whole RIT plate and you inoculated the grain with that. Would you worry that it would leach out of the agar and into the...
I probably wouldn't, because fungi usually degrade those large organic molecules. So the reason why RIT dye works is because it's actually antibacterial. Now we got to go
Okay.
back a second to your first part. RIT dye is not going to kill bacteria. Most of the things we use are not bactericidal. They won't kill it.
They're
They're
bacteriostatic.
bacteriostatic, right? So even if you're growing on a RIT dye plate, the bacteria might still be there. So if you were to use that plate to make spawn, you could still have bacteria there, and they just are not growing.
Right.
So that's the thing with things like alcohol and peroxide. They'll kill bacteria, right?
Right.
They'll actually break the bacteria. But the way, as you know, gentamicin and any other antibiotic, which RIT dye is actually one of the very, very first antibiotics. Brock was talking about this, how other colors don't work. It's because they're what are called azo dyes, AZO. It's the old, they used to call them coal tar dyes. And the reason why black RIT dye works is because the stuff that makes it black is literally, they used to call them coal tar dyes because they made stuff black. So if you go way back to the history of dyeing and like fabrics and cloth, it starts off with using these azo dyes, and that's what's in RIT dye. And if you look even further, they were used for humans, but they're not bactericidal. They're like bacteriostatic.
Right.
Yeah,
So it suppresses bacterial growth.
right. So if you were to go, I wouldn't use a RIT dye plate, probably just out of paranoia.
Yeah.
But I guess if you didn't have normal plates, you could. But you know, you could use a small. Here's another thing: people inoculate with too big of their agar chunks.
Mhm.
You know, I'll inoculate like a pound bag of grain with like literally like a Sharpie cap worth of agar.
Oh,
I see
really?
people. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. Like
Oh,
that.
then I'm even
That
using too much.
that
Okay.
Post-it note. That's the average size for maybe even a 2-pound bag of
Okay.
patty rice. I use that much agar, and
I'll
like
have
you're
to
saying
try
with
that.
do it, because you can use this, you can keep the plate. So I got so many plates like you, and I'll use literally like maybe a third of the plate for 2 pounds of grain. And then you let it grow. And here's another test: if your grain is sterile, it shouldn't fucking matter, right? Because if you're sorry, I swore, but I had to get one curse word in there. Effing you.
It's okay. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do bleeping, just so our show can just be right.
Sorry, it should be like half the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if your grain is sterile and you only use a piece of agar that big and it gets contaminated, that's because your grain was contaminated or your agar was contaminated.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
know
like
what?
a
That is
double.
really a great test, because you're
Exactly.
right. Theoretically, you could put a single, like if you're doing grain to grain, you could take a single piece of grain and put it in a sterile jar, and it
Exactly.
should have absolutely no problem in,
Exactly.
colonizing that jar.
Yeah, it's almost like a control in the control. So if you
Yes.
put just a post-it size note piece of agar, and you don't even, sometimes I don't even break it up. I'll put it off in the corner of the bag. I use bags now. So when you first put it in the bag, let it sit in the corner, and if the rest of the bag gets contaminated, you know it was your grain prep.
Right.
So the agar is fine, and you got this big like little colony growing in the corner where your agar chunk is, and the rest of the bag is contaminated.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with your grain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's
you
like
see that a lot because, I mean, oh my gosh, let me tell you, the favorite hobby of new hobby growers is this contaminated pictures, right? And so you see the pictures all the time of a jar where there's just like literally the Mason-Dixon line of the jar, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of been sitting here for weeks. Okay, throw that jar out. Obviously, right? Yeah.
It's
But
it's
that goes into timing
oh
too. This is why it's important to start off growing basic cubes. They're vigorous. They have a quicker
please
timeline,
please do.
and you learn the pacing so that when things stall, you can go, yeah, something's wrong here. You don't even fart around. You don't post a picture. You can just move on. You know, if you want to.
That's it.
If you want to, I just had a buddy, one of my really favorite
Yep.
people on Discord. He was doing the grow along with Miss Mosh on our Discord, and he got just a tiny little patch of trichoderma in his grow bag. And he was like, you know what? I was talking to Miss Mush. I'm just going to, as an experiment, let it go and see what happens. And of course, I said, don't bother.
I
You're
know.
wasting
I
your
saw
time.
that.
And he did it anyway. And now he's not going to eat the fruit, but he got some big old monster fruit out of the deal. And I thought what was interesting is to go, oh, look, that fighting the trichoderma did affect the morphology of that fruit. So there was
Yeah.
a little bit of a learning experience there. And the whole time I'm just like in my head going, don't allow trichoderma to proliferate. Get it out of your house now. Like I almost was just like scared, but he didn't
At,
open it, and yes, it's whatever.
at least isolate it or something. Like, don't keep it in your grow room or your tent or whatever. Like when you go on vacation or whatever, and you come back after 4 or 5 days, and you look in a tent and you see that green haze. It's like the worst feeling ever.
Don't jinx me. That is never
I'm
gonna
sorry. I'm
happen.
sorry I said that, man. I'm sorry,
Never.
dude.
I'm going on vacation soon, guys, and I cannot have this happen.
Just look in the door, and if it just burn everything, you got insurance, right?
Just guys, what we're saying here is just buy insurance, burn your house down. That is the solution.
No, people used to say that, but I've gotten tricked in my tents, my Martha tents or whatever they're called now. One contaminated tray is not the end of the world.
No.
One contaminated mono tub, if you've got 2 shoe boxes, it's not the end of the world. Just take it out, try not to move it, get it outside, and then just maybe if you can get that tent empty. I just did it last night I've been having bacteria because I missed too much. So like I have the problem after doing this for many years. I still miss because I love my little Flairosol. Like, I need more humidity.
It is fun. Yeah, I got one back there sitting on the. Yep.
I need to stop. But like you said, beginners, and I'm not by any means a beginner, but I still get in there and like, I need some more mist.
It's fun.
Like it looks dry over there. Like, and I'm like, stop. The albinos do not like free water on their surfaces. I had an iceberg grow garbage because I decided 1 day or 2 days, like they look dry.
Yeah.
Next day, freaking Pseudomonas everywhere, bacteria, blotch, garbage. And they were the squat phenos again.
Right.
I had a shoebox with the squat phenos again, and I just ruined them.
I'm sure you'll get them back. I'm sure you.
Yeah, they look okay.
Sometimes I think DC Mac told me he thought squats had to do with temperature. So who knows? Maybe we can start running some experiments.
I'm starting to wonder. That's a big topic. I've been reading about it. It's a big topic.
Yeah. Now, before we move on, let me real quick cover this about if you do get a tub that contains, especially trichoderma, the minute it's green, it has sporulated. You have spores. And like Ed was saying, you don't want to disturb them if you possibly can avoid it, especially if you're growing open tray or if you already, if you had to open the lid to see that there's spores there, just calmly and quietly put that lid back down, go outside. But now one thing that I do, because I'm not, even when I take it outside, if I get a little patch of green, when I take it outside, I used to have the spray bottle of inside. It's a bactericidal, horrible chemical that kills everything that's alive, including yourself. But I used to mist it, right? I used to spray it, and then one day I go, wait, I'm spraying it, and I'm creating this huge turbulence that's then blowing all the spores around. So then I started opening up the spray bottle, and I would just pour it slowly directly over that little spot, and I would leave it there, covered back up, and then I would come back later and dump it out. At least, of course, I'm leaching horrible chemicals into the ground. I'm a bad person. Hopefully I can sleep tonight.
As long as it's not motor oil, it's okay.
Right. But But you know, I don't want a giant where I dump all these out. I don't want a giant proliferation of trichoderma either. So I try to do a little something to kill those. But you know, a little bleach water, probably even hydrogen peroxide, something that just will hurt the trichoderma before I dump it out. That's just what I do. Maybe it's stupid.
Yeah, mine goes out with. I just get a big garbage bag and put the tub and everything inside and take it out and then empty it inside the garbage
okay.
bag because I've got like a municipal garbage pickup. So the next morning, hopefully it's gone and nobody
Nice.
opens up the bag. I hope
Just
for
some guy
several reasons.
later, yeah.
Yeah, like
Opening it up, looking for food, and it's like
No,
trichoderma.
exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple like apes or something. Hey, what's
Right.
that white mushroom? I'll eat
No,
that too.
I have never gotten close enough. Now, I'm going to tell you, one of my favorite aspects of microbiology was learning what everything smelled like. And I kind of weirdly liked what E. coli smelled like. I don't know why I liked it, but
Yeah.
I did. I don't know. I never minded working with that one. Some of them have a very unpleasant odor for sure.
I was gonna say you should never tell anybody that, but they're probably gonna find out. You like to
What's
no,
Geeky
what you
doing
know,
over there? Is he
E.
sniffing
coli,
bacteria
like
again?
sniffing the E. coli. Why is he in the
Is
biohazard
he huffing
box?
E. coli?
Yeah. Well, I grew Helicobacter, Campylobacter.
Yeah.
That stuff
Oh,
does
yeah.
smell bad, bad,
I'm
bad,
sure
bad.
it does.
It's like you open the plate and it's like, wow, even in the like biosafety level 3 hood, you can
You
smell
can
it.
still smell it.
It's gross.
Nasty.
Yeah, and some of the other fungi, strangely enough, they'll smell like licorice or almonds.
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
got
They
like
kind of have
very
a pleasant. Yeah. Yeah. E.
most
coli. I don't even
bacteria.
know if what. I don't think there's an analog to it, but I didn't dislike. I kind of every time he worked with it, I was like, oh, cool. I get to smell E. coli again. I
The
don't know why I like it.
media, it depends on the media too. There's one, it's called LB broth, Lennox something
Yeah.
LB broth. It
Yeah.
smells bad. It's got
Oh,
that
that one does.
peptone hydrosylate
Yeah.
protein
Peptones
stuff in it.
stinks, man.
Bad.
Big
Yeah.
fan of that.
But E. coli by itself, I don't know. I maybe never smelled it. Or in the bathroom, you probably smell it. Maybe lots of
It's
them.
okay. When I visit you in Bangkok, I'll bring some E. coli. We can sniff it on camera.
Dude, my drain, because like I don't know, like the drainage systems here, sometimes you just get these smells and you smell your neighbor's bathroom too. And
Well,
like
so
sewage.
as an ex-licensed plumber, I can tell you that's because there's inadequate plumbing. Somebody doesn't have a crap
Yeah,
installed correctly. Yeah,
exactly.
things are
Exactly.
draining back. Something's not vented properly. There's a lot of reasons for all that. Yes.
Yeah, it's not fun sometimes.
All right, so we're coming up on about an hour here. Let's do one more question and call it a day. He's got a few more, but we'll save those for another day. So last question. The cocoa core used for plants can have trick in it because, as you know, it's beneficial for plants. Is that different than the trichoderma in our air? Why would it matter if cocoa core has trike in it, since the grain should be fully colonized and the core is non-nutritious? It's a good question.
This is an excellent question. And I've been kind of fighting with this with people. I don't, the traditional 50-50 bucket tech, the ratios there I think are all like just kind of guidelines and people kind of take them as some sort of like set in stone, like it has to be a 650-gram brick of coir and how many quarts of water. You guys, coir varies considerably from season to season, from manufacturer to manufacturer.
Brick to
Not
brick.
all brick to
Brick to
brick,
brick,
yeah.
brother. Brick to brick. You can buy a
Exactly,
3-pack
man.
and one brick behaves completely. One brick, you can
Totally.
follow the recipe to a T, squeeze it, and it's perfect. The next one, you're like, how on God's earth did I do the exact same thing? And it's too wet now. Like, yes, there's huge variance in that.
The
Absolutely.
bigger bricks too, if you get the one that's at the bottom, it could have been bashed a bit in the shipping or at the factory on the pallet or whatever. It's not you can't follow this like set in stone ratio. Um, I hate to say it, but it comes from experience. And I still, after making hundreds, if not thousands of tubs and trays and bags, I still, every time, I'd say probably 1 out of 4 batches of sub, like I get it wrong. And it's just coir and maybe vermiculate. Sometimes I'm still trying to get rid of my perlite. Um, But yeah, maybe one day you're tired and you don't squeeze it hard enough, or like you said, you get the ground up almost like dust, and then other time you get like fibers. Could have been a different coconut tree, you know? Malaysia tree, Thailand, Indonesia. There's different species of coconuts, you know,
Yeah.
or sub varieties or whatever. It could just be different, and people just have to get used to like squeezing their substrate.
Well,
It's
and I only
there's
use
no
coir from Micronesia, so I
I
don't really have
know,
anything
my
to worry
God.
about.
Yeah, do you sell it also?
I
You
think it
know
is. I
that?
think it is extremely worth saying that, and this goes back to the grain brands and things like that in the batch discussion. Um, if you actually watch some YouTube videos on how this is harvested, it is two guys
Mm,
sitting down next to a dirty ass machine,
uh-huh.
manually breaking the stuff up, running it
That's
through a shredder. So from day to day, week to week, there's just so many variants that can play into this
exactly.
that, yeah, you must check field capacity every single time. You just
I,
can't.
I, s- I see here they have it literally piled up in like garbage piles, like because where they
Huge,
process
huge,
huge,
30
huge
foot tall piles.
piles.
Yes.
Imagine the bottom of that pile is fermenting and
Yes.
composting, and then they just mix it all together and chuck it in a bag or a brick.
Right.
Now, that being said, a lot of it's pasteurized or sterilized, especially for export, but you're still dealing with, like, I mean, this stuff is pretty cheap, you know, it's going to have debris in it and other things.
Right.
But so the way I get around that field capacity, just figure it out. Um, and watch YouTube videos, soil science YouTube videos about field capacity. There's other people that use field capacity too, not just
Yeah.
mycologists. The other thing is I actually boil my substrate. Like I have a big pan and I
I
boil
gotta
it. And
try this.
we talked about this before. I do that to leach out some of the salts, like the
Right.
stuff and the debris. And I can literally see at the bottom of the pan when I pulled out my,
Right.
it's like soup. When I pull out my sub and I squeeze it, there'll be like a bottom layer that looks like the beach. And it's
Right.
all of this stuff that if you don't get rid of that, it will severely affect your field capacity and make your sub anaerobic.
Right.
Anaerobic's bad because bacteria like anaerobic, no air conditions. So if you've got all of this debris and stuff, the sediment that is in now your substrate from your bucket tech, it's not good. It's really not good. And I know it takes a little bit more time and effort to squeeze all that water out, but I would guarantee that probably 50% of the beginners substrates that get tricked, it's because they're overhydrated and they're anaerobic and they haven't used maybe the proper procedure. This like coir, you guys, is dirty. I don't know where people have got this idea that coir is some magic sterile ingredient. It's got cellulose and polysaccharides and stuff in it. It's probably not going to be good for maybe like, you know, I don't know, like feeding animals or whatever, but it's still got stuff in it, and just saying it's this sort of inert. It's not like rock wool. I think this comes
Right.
from the
It's not rock
cannabis.
wool. Yes.
Yeah, it comes from the cannabis industry. Again, they think that everything that you use as a media for your cannabis is sterile. It's not. Remember, coir is an organic material that comes from a freaking tree
Right.
on a in from a country halfway around the world. Like it might not be the best quality and it might not have been handled properly and it's cheap and it's not meant for what we use it for. It's used for
Right.
like putting out in your flower garden to like no for your roses and tomatoes. It's not used for indoor sterile environments.
Yeah.
And that
But
being
now,
said,
so also, let me just quickly say, um, sure, things might not generally want to grow on it, but that doesn't mean that if you're mixing your sub too wet, you have not created then now a watery anaerobic environment that will allow bacteria or trike to
totally.
proliferate. So just because things don't specifically want to chew up that cocoa core, it doesn't mean that things cannot grow within and amongst your cocoa core.
Exactly. Look at your bathroom wall. Like your shower wall doesn't have like sugar on it or anything, but bacteria still grows there, right? Like your toilet bowl, I mean, you pee in it every day, but like it still gets nasty and like stuff
Right.
grows there, right?
Yeah, you
And
just
your
pee like
hand,
ammonia in sterile ammonia urine
okay,
into it all day,
okay,
and yet still things are growing in there.
okay, a bad example, but
Yes.
you know, I But I
It's true.
I put it outside though every time. I just do it in a garbage bag and immediately take it outside with my trick. Throw it over to the neighbors.
So what you're saying is every time your tubs get tricked, you're supposed to pee in your tub first.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
that's good.
And then make sure you get rid of it over the fence in your neighbor's yard. They'll never
Always.
notice.
Right, but then if their tomato plants grow better than yours,
Exactly. See, trick and ammonia.
you
Exactly.
need the ammonia in the trick. It's gonna help.
That'd be.
Yes.
Dude, we might need to figure something out, man. We need to like
Yeah.
make us a symbiotic relationship with the tomato growers.
Yes,
Like
that's
recycle all our trick and piss.
like Three Sisters. Do you know about this old Native American?
Oh
They
yeah,
grow
yeah.
peas, corn, and what's the other one? I forget.
Squash.
Squash, yeah.
Squash.
But the just that symbiotic relationship is, and I did it one year, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is a thing. This works
For
really well.
sure.
Now harvesting and all that sort of a pain in the butt.
Yeah, exactly. I used to talk about that for like an hour in most of my classes.
Nice.
You can get pretty fed the Three Sisters. I always thought it was just some like, like BBC or
Like that it was a cultural practice that didn't have any like scientific merit.
I
It just shows you how
It's something
all our
nerdy.
ancestors, they had nothing but time to fuck around and find out.
yeah.
And their observational abilities were likely very strong.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And some of these people that think again, these people that come up with these what they think are new ideas, it's like these are not new ideas.
But it's cool.
Like
I mean,
somebody's
at the end of the day, let's say Brock thought he invented trench sequestration. It doesn't take away from the idea that if he truly hadn't perused a million white paper articles or scoured the shroomery, and he did just naturally come up with an idea, it still doesn't discredit him, like,
No,
cool,
hell,
he's using his
God,
brain,
no.
he's thinking about it, right? Now, I think he was more just trying to post an idea that he hadn't seen people talk about. But, this happens. Sometimes you think you came up with the greatest idea in the world, and of course somebody on Facebook's going to let you know you didn't and shoot you down. And at the end of the day, I love it if people are thinking about what they're doing and
Yeah.
trying new things. That's wonderful. And then you post about it on Actual Science on my Discord, and then Ed will tell you you're wrong. And it's, hey, but at least you had an idea. I still love people that hypothesize and theorize. As long as you're willing to hear actual science, once you've proposed your ideas, community definitely benefits from people that are always thinking about what's going on, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if Brock's listening out there, we still need to start that trench sequestration death metal band, That's
Yes.
that's what initially drew me to it. I was like, what the hell is trench sequestration? I'm like, that sounds like a death metal song or band.
Like,
Yeah, like trench sequestration. Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
we'll work on it. Throw in some
hey,
written somehow.
maybe we should ask
Whatever.
Mushman 9000 if he wants to do, because he could do that. I mean, he's literally like the prince of death metal, dude. That guy could do it.
I know. I'll
have
I'll
to
track
throw
it
the
down
idea out to him.
for sure, man.
That'd be cool. All right, dude. Well, another great evening, and we will chit chat with you next week.
All right, man. You have a good one. Everybody out there, see ya.
All right, take care. All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in tonight. I had fun talking with Carla and Sarah and Ed. Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. Next week, I will be sitting down with Dark Matter Mycology. He is a clinical forensic psychologist. He is a PhD. He is very well versed in traumas, how people experience traumas, how it affects them, and he is a psilocybin advocate. So we're going to sit down with him next week and talk about how psilocybin, his opinion about how psilocybin can be integrated and help out people who need to do a lot of therapy, a lot of therapeutic work. So we'll be talking to him, and then I'll be talking with Tree Digs Mycology. His name's Matt Blanchard. He is a super nice, super awesome dude, and we'll be talking all about his plate porn business and kind of how he got into mycology and why he stays. And he's a super nice guy, so that's going to be fun. And then again, more Ed. There's never enough Ed, guys. There's a lot of science to learn. Ed knows a lot of it, and I just love talking with him about some of so we'll be doing more of that next week. Anyway, until next week, happy growing. Hope you guys have great flushes. See you next time.